Welcome back, everybody, to the Meet the Bus podcast. I'm your host, Jeffrey Reckes, and this week we are back for episode 21. And ladies and gentlemen, I am super excited for the guest I'm having on this week. Everything he says should be put on a t-shirt, and I'm just so excited for the quotes we're going to get from this episode. So without further ado, let's introduce our guest. So today, who we have on the podcast, he was a tuba at the Boston Crusaders from 2012 to 2015 and took off 2014. And then taught me at the Oregon Crusaders from 2016 to 2018 on the Vis Staff, and then was on the Madison Scouts Vis Staff from 2019 to 2022. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome on Dan Hoffman. Welcome on to the podcast.
Hey, Divas. Hey, so good to have me. Thank you so much.
I'm so excited. This is going to be so much fun. Oh, my goodness.
Yeah.
How are you? How are you doing?
I'm so great, honestly. Life has never felt more balanced and more alive. And it's just like I'm watching the sunset right now. I'm living in Arizona, and it's just like
glowing.
Yeah, life is great. Life is great.
You got the golden hour for us for the first hour of the podcast. Thank you so much.
Honestly, pleasure is all mine. Actually, I think Mother Earth, she really did that for us. She really snapped.
She did. She snapped. So starting us off, Dan, do you want to tell the people just a little bit about yourself and what you're up to these days?
It's a great question. So I was a pageantry professional for a million years, more or less. I grew up in upstate New York, then lived in Boston, and then moved to Arizona 6 years ago. And but then the pandemic happened and kind of ended that whole career. So it went from being a career to a hobby. So right now I have a data entry job, remote job. So random. I like draft engineering blueprints for Verizon workers. Ooh. It's like not interesting. It's kind of like high.
No big deal.
No big deal. It pays. And it gives me time to do things like this and to teach marching band in the fall. I judge visual effect for our indoor percussion circuit in the state. Ooh. So really fun. So I have band still in my life, but it's fun to be an adult now and be a human beyond band.
I love that. I absolutely love that. When did you get into judging, by the way? Because I didn't even know that was something you were doing. When did you get into that?
That's a great question. This is my third season judging. So 2022 was the first. I think that was like the first season. Like indoor came back and was like actually scored, and we just had a shortage of visual people. So I was recruited to do visual effect, and it was crazy because like the first show I did, I was so nervous to give any feedback because it's like, who am I to talk about this and to give numbers?
Yeah.
And then the very first critique, there were at least like 4 groups that were like, this is like the best tape I've ever gotten. And I was like, okay, that's fierce. Apparently, if you're just really anxious and talk really fast, but you're really excited, like, that's all you need. So
you posted like a little clip of like one of your judge tapes the other day. It was the funniest thing.
The symbol, the glove.
Yeah, no, you're like, oh, stop the glove.
Ooh, more color, more texture. The way that we're seeing blue, so many different textures and shades. This is so cool. What a great way to clear the floor, but like have something visually happening, like to keep us from thinking like, oh, this is just a functional transition. But it's like, oh, we're the glove, the symbol. Stop it, stop it. Yeah, these. Oh my God, these silks.
People live for a gay person sounding gay. That's really what it is.
So, like, guys, this means that was awesome. I listened to it. I was just cracking up, dying laughing the whole time. That's awesome. So hopping in, I ask everybody this question who comes on, this being a drum corps podcast. So I want to know from you, how were you introduced to DCI?
Great question. So growing up in Syracuse, New York, so we had like a big marching band culture. Surprisingly enough, like marching back in the day were like huge. Like the last time my band has made finals at BOA Grand Nationals every year they've gone. However, the last year they went was 1995. So like, and I started, but it's like that's all part of the culture. Like I don't know, but part of what made that culture so strong were some of the staff there who. 2 of them happen to be parents of my best friends. So Jackie and Dan Campbell, who are WGI color guard judges. They both marched back in the day. And then their son was in my grade. And so we were best friends since like first grade. And so I went with them to Allentown, I think 2010 was the first time. So it was the summer before my senior year. And I was like, these tubas, tubas are playing pedal B flats in passe. This is crazy. So, and then, but I was like, there's no way I could ever do that. But I went again the following year, and I was like, I have to do that, and then I did.
Hell yeah. So how from New York did you land? And I'm so surprised first off that like cuz I mean, I didn't get to grow up in the Northeast. I was just born out there, born in Massachusetts and the whole thing, but like coming to Missouri and kind of like that's where we found marching band because my parents like growing up they were like I mean, we didn't know about like marching band back in Massachusetts. Like we had no idea that was we didn't know about drum corps. This wasn't a thing. Like we like there's band. Yeah, sure, but like we know that there's a movie Drumline, but like we didn't know it was marching band until like here. So like we're like, okay, yeah, sure. If you want to do it, like go ahead. So but from
That's
you, what were you
yeah.
gonna say?
I was gonna say so. I forgot that you like lived in Massachusetts because like I also lived in Massachusetts. So like I'm very aware of that marching band scene and like how tiny it is, and yet also how
Yeah.
historic. It's so funny how you have some of the best names, the biggest names in pageantry are there,
Yeah.
and it's but that they're not teaching those groups, so it's just like you don't know about them. So
Oh
it's so
yeah.
you lived in such a historic place, and yet didn't know about it till later.
Like I had no idea until I got to OC and it was so cool because I forgot why do I feel like her name was Jackie, who taught on the guard staff in 2016,
Jackie
who
Gaff.
like
Yeah.
yeah, and she had like the strong Boston accent. And I was like, "Oh, dude, yes.
Uh-huh.
This is so nice. Feels like home." And it was just so crazy cuz like I didn't know there was a scene out in the Northeast like that until I had done drum corps and met other people and be like, "Oh yeah, no, like that's a big deal. Like there's a lot of cool shit happening up there." I was like, "Oh, I missed out."
Yeah. Yeah.
I was curious for you. How did you land on Boston? Was it just like an area thing, or was it like I really like what they do? I want to go audition for them.
So interesting. Like it was a coincidence. The first live drum corps performance I ever saw was actually the Boston Crusaders. They
Hmm.
rehearsed at school because they did the Rome show. Rome is like an hour east of where I grew up. For those of you who know the Rome show,
Hmm.
also lives like 5 minutes away. That doesn't matter. Uh, but Boston rehearsed there, and then 2 days later, I went to Allentown and saw that show. That was a coincidence. I landed at Boston because I originally like auditioned for Bluecoats, as every
Mhm.
rookie know any better does. And it's like I got a call back. I flew to Atlanta for the satellite audition because that worked best for my schedule.
Mhm.
And I didn't really see me march with a contra because there weren't contras there. So then my first time holding a contra was at the callback camp for the Bluecoats. And it's like for 16 spots, there were 11 returning vets. And then there were like 15 more like vets of other drum corps. And I'm learning how to hold a tuba. Like I'm marched 40 as a sousaphone. What does that matter? I just did not have it. I did not have it. Um, and I remember being so demoralized in the hotel room afterwards when it was like, I actually got like, it was fine musically, but visually they're like, there's just no way. So I thought I was done with drum corps after that. And then the next morning I woke up and I was like, you're being ridiculous. Like,
Mhm.
let's all the drum corps that you would potentially want to march for. So I think I emailed Boston, I emailed Glassman, RIP, and I emailed the Colts.
Mhm.
And Colts never got back to me. Glassman were like, we have a euphonium spot,
Mhm.
but I was like, I really want a tuba spot because I want to go to Bluecoats next year. So then Boston was like, hey, like we're still looking. You can audition. I didn't realize until much later that like literally it was like, oh, you're a human being that like wants to hold this thing, and you can find the money for this.
We love you.
Yeah, I did all that I could in my efforts to like be admissible, but it turns out I was just I could play it an F on the instrument, so that was enough that summer. So
He said, "You're a body."
I was not. I was a little bitch, but also yeah, it was just so. If you want to march drum corps, march contra. It's just no one wants to do it.
You're doing the dirty work.
Exactly.
How old were you when you went for your first season?
18. So
18. Okay.
a youngin. My age out was the summer after I graduated college, so I didn't start. My first summer marching was after my freshman year.
Oh, did you have the golden year? Is that how that
Yeah,
happened?
like if I was born in any other state in the country, pretty much, like I would be like one of the oldest ones a year after. Like I was class of 2011 for high school,
Wow.
but I was like October. I was born in October, and the cutoff in New York for like the next school year is like if you're born in December 1st, whereas everywhere else it's September 1st. So I was just really
Mhm.
yeah.
Interesting. Okay. So like had you already gone to college by the time you went to drum corps for the first time?
Yeah, so I finished my freshman year of college, and then a month later, I was in Florida for not Florida. I was in Florida for the camps. I was in where do we have movies? California. Yeah,
Oh
we
my,
had
yeah, no, that's right. I was gonna say, because like going through the videos, like doing a little deep dive into it, like I saw like your first couple shows were the West Coast tour, and I thought that
yeah.
was really interesting. Like how the hell did you guys do that? Because I know like now like they're strictly like Castleton, so like how did that all work out?
Well, like back in the day, I don't think there were like the strategic marketing partnerships that like there are now. Like now,
Yeah,
it's like you have a contract with a college for like 3 or 5 years.
yeah.
But back then it was kind of like every year it's like we'll see what school's gonna host us. Um, and I think that at that point in time, like DCI, I think tried getting one East Coast or Midwest group to go out to the West Coast tour every year. Like I
Hmm.
think um, cadets the year before went out. So it's not unheard of for East Coast group to go out. But I think Boston was really trying to be like, we hate the G7, we deserve to be part of it. So like we need to
Ah,
like
I want
so.
to talk
But
about that. Yes.
so interesting though, 'cause I think we're the only non-West Coast group to do move-ins in the West Coast. Like Carolina Crown, when they do the West Coast tour, they do it in South Carolina, and then they take a
And then they
week. And
go up for like the week or whatever before.
yeah, but it's like no, I had 2 weeks of rehearsal in Folsom High School and 2 weeks or 1 week at Fresno State University. We had 1 hour of rain, all of move-ins, which was a stark contrast for the next 2 summers I marched. But yeah,
Just rain every day at least, like for a little
easy.
bit. Oh my
Yeah.
goodness. I was curious in that opening year because I think 2012 was that the year after Sarah Myers by chance?
Yes,
Her
I
being
started
there?
out. Yeah.
Absolutely, which she is going to be on this podcast at some point. I don't know when, but like I'm going to get her on this podcast. I will message her a million times until she's on here. But I
Yes.
remember a cool story that she told us. I'm pretty sure she had a big hand in creating the core necklace there if I'm correct, right?
I think you're right. I think that is part of the lore. Yes.
Just a little Boston Crusaders lore.
Yeah.
But I think she like I remember at least because she would tell us stories all the time because she was like super vet, like all I think 5 years, like all at Boston, and then like kept going like I think she went like 12 summers in a row, just like on the road performing or as a staff member, like all the way through. So we would hear all the stories. I was just wondering from you when you got there, I like from her like creating the core necklace, like or having a hand in that. Like was she ever talked about when you got there, like your rookie year? Like I don't know. I know that's 2012, long time ago. Even like I don't remember much from then, but like I remember when I got to OC in 16, for example, and like Caleb Pfeiffer was like a really big deal in the drum corps. Like when you got there, because it was like 7 years. That's 7 years at this drum corps. Same with like Delaney Nestor, people who had been there for a while and who had made like an impact to the drum corps. Like when you got there, even if you didn't know anybody, like you knew those people because like those were the people. These were like I don't want to say pillars because that sounds so like that sounds so official, but just like
Well,
really important role models at these
yeah,
places, you know? Like that's why I asked, like, was she ever like mentioned as like, oh man, Sarah Myers, she was the shit.
absolutely. I mean, she was so Boston, especially in that era. I think any East Coast group, this is true of like any of the old school groups. It's like
Mhm.
old school mentality. I think is this idea of like this is a family, this is a bond. Like you can't leave. Like once you're here, you're here, and if you leave,
Mhm.
then you're shit. Like we'll spit on your grave, and it's like I guess, but if I could get a medal, then it's like kind of cool. I don't know.
I
But with
guess.
He's definitely like such a legend, a giant, as it were. This core is made of giants, allegedly. Um, so, but it's like she was there for so long, and it's like the legend of the girl that had like 2 bum knees and like had all these injuries, but she never sat out a rep because she had to give it her all for this group, and she had to set the example. And at
Mhm.
the time, it's like the myth and the legend of it is so inspiring and exciting. But I'm glad that we're in an era of drum corps now where that kind of thing is sort of just like, don't do that. Like your body should be resting. You should be healthy. And like
Like
she's
if you have like a torn ACL, like her story was like I think her age out year finals night, like tore ACL in the run, like finals night, and like I remember she was like, yeah, she told us a story in 17. She was like, I tore my knee in the run, finished the run. Next day, we're at the airport. I get to Atlanta. She's like, I have a connecting flight in Atlanta and I'm running across the Atlanta airport and like I tear the other knee or I like re-tear the knee that had been torn. And she's like, and I got on the plane and I went home. So you're going to get back on the field. We're just like, yep. And I will get back out there. And now, no, you could definitely not get away with that now. Like she like dragged herself across the finish line for her age out. But I was just so curious because like, I mean, even the people I met after that, even my, my brother marching there from 14 to 16. I mean, he even told me when she started teaching in 17, he was like, oh man, he was like, she's intense. Be careful. I ended up loving her, but
she must have been so good for him because he was such a lazy little twat, and so he needed so.
And she said that, and she was like, she absolutely said that. She was like, you and your brother are like. She's like, I had to kick his ass every day last year, and I don't even have to like. Oh my god. Oh, I love it. What'd you say?
I said I miss him so much. He was like the most annoying member of my section, my Ageout. Like he was like, I can't help with. Like, what do you mean can't help with props? It's literally like your job. I don't have time to do this, but I have to. I don't know. We'll get into Jason later.
We will. We absolutely will. Oh my goodness, that's funny. Talking about like just your rookie year in general. Speaking of the Giants, what was that like for you? Learning Giant for the first time and kind of like getting those moments. Cause like for me, I didn't get to march the corps. I got to watch my brother march and I auditioned there for 3 years in a row. So like for me, like I got very invested in the lore and the history of the Boston Crusaders. And like, even still, like getting ready for this interview, watching videos of the corps sing Giant, I cry. Like I sit there and I like get really teary-eyed because I remember like that, like those videos of like the corps singing Giant specifically, like it reminds me of like little Jeffrey who got into drum corps, and I like hear and I think of like my brother doing it and like inspiring me to do the activity. And like whenever I would be there in person and watch him and watch the group do it, it was so like powerful and it would make me like emotional in person because it was just so cool to see. So I'm wondering, because you were there from, I mean, you took 2014 off, but 12, 13, and 15. What was that like for you, your first time, like as a rookie getting into drum corps, and then, you learn this corps song, and then, you sing it for the first time, you're like, oh, that was cool. Like, I learned the corps song, but as it keeps going on through the season, like, what was that like for you? Because I think that's just one of the most special, like, corps songs out there.
Yeah, absolutely. It's so interesting. I honestly, I'm racking my brain. I can't recall any specific situation of like, even when we learned it or like singing it for the first time. I remember a lot in 2013 and 2015. 15 especially was lovely because like at that point in time, like one thing I do remember is that when it's the night that we actually learn Giant, it's like the whole corps gets together and like all the age outs, or as many as there's room for, given time to like talk about, like every age out is assigned a different line to talk about like what this means to you, and then like so it's like you're already getting like you're connecting the personal to the historical, like this song that has served our group for like 50 years or something at this point. So that was really special. But I think what sticks out to me, what's more sentimental to me, is more just like the people that I was with, and like I remember a lot of the bonds that I developed, especially with a lot of the vets. It's interesting. I can't remember singing the song.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I remember like it was a big thing for me, especially when I like finally got to audition there. Just like being able to like learn it, or just like watch it and then learn it and then play with everybody. It was just like that's a cool little like nerdy thing I like to talk about. But like continuing on, because there's so much to talk about with you and there's so many questions that I have for you. So I feel guilty, but I'm gonna have to like skip ahead in some because I want to make sure we can talk about everything. But with 2012 moving on throughout your career, what made you stay at Boston? Because you're talking about how like you're like, okay, I'm gonna do my 1 year of drum corps and then like I'm going to Bluecoats. Like I'll do it here for Boston, but like I'm trying to go to Bluecoats next year. So like, I'm trying to do that. So what made you stay at Boston?
I think a huge thing was just the first impressions that I got from both groups. Because with Bluecoats, I didn't meet any vets really until the callback audition. This is again for the 2012 season. So this is like January 2012. And they were just dicks. And like, I don't blame them because I did not have it. I did not have what it took. And like, I didn't know that at the time. But it was just a very isolating, horrible experience that first camp to just be like, I don't know a single person even like that I know. I don't even know anyone from my state that's here. No one from New York.
Yeah.
But actually there was one tuba player that was from New York, but that doesn't matter. They were so intense and intimidating. But then with Boston, I show up to the first camp and it's like the tubas couldn't have been more like couldn't have had better camaraderie. There was like 4 or 5 vets from 2011 that had returned, a couple 2 or 3 year vets there, and they were just so kind to me, so warm immediately. Immediately, like they taught me how to hold the horn, how they picked it up, how they do everything. It was encouraging, and so just from that first impression, that first weekend, like that made me feel like, okay, I want to get through this, and I want to earn this contract. I want to march here. It also was it was a really successful year. It was a real hype to beat the Cavaliers for the first time since the 1970s. There was just a lot of things that like went our way that shouldn't have happened. Like we only ever beat every like Friday or Sunday. We were part of the Tour of Champions shows.
Was this in 2012 or 13?
This is 2012. 2012.
Okay, gotcha.
So in 2012, they still did the Tour of Champions thing, and like that like exclusive to the top 8 from the previous year. So Boston got 11. So it's like us and the G7 essentially. And it's like every one of the Tour Champions shows, we were 8th, no matter what. Sometimes by a margin. But then at the San Antonio Regional and at Allentown and finals, the only three of the shows that matter the most, we beat the Cavaliers. And it was just so fun to only beat them at the time that it counted. Like, I think but Madison beat us both. But then we beat both of them come finals. So, I don't know. It was fun to feel like a sense of belonging. So much ego. Ways felt like we were still like the underdog that didn't really deserve space at the table. And I think I thrive where I get to be on the outskirts, sort of, or like colluding with others, Yeah.
I think it's so weird that like drum corps, an activity that people already like, it's banned to begin with. And like a lot of people do band because they're like, I'm trying to find friends and I really like music and I like playing my instrument. So like, I'm going to go to this group of like-minded people that like to do the thing that I like to do. And then like those people within this organization are like, we need to create like a separation from the other groups because we're so elite that we need to be our own like elite like group of people. And it's like, wait, what? Like we're in band. What are we talking about right now? I think that's so weird to me that was even like, that was a real thing, a real presentation that happened. Talking about that because we brought up G7 and I want to get into that for specifically the 2014 show because I think so much of the 14 show was kind of like a big middle finger back at DCI for that. But like, was the G7 ever talked about in 2012 or 2013 where it was like, like was that ever discussed? Because I feel like I didn't know any of the lore until like 14 when the show happened and my brother is explaining to me and my family like, this is happening. Like we make this G7 set because, and he starts like talking about everything. I'm like, whoa, like this is crazy. So like, was that ever talked about in 12 or 13?
I honestly feel like I never heard anyone talk about the G7 in Boston ever. I feel like that's almost more like just an online thing. It's a real thing that happened in the flesh, but like, it was more like, it wasn't talking about the G7 exclusively as much as sort of like, we're Boston, we deserve to be at the top, period. So we're going to take these, we're going to go do the West Coast tour to prove that we're just like the big boys. It was like more of like general us versus them versus like us breaking the G7 per se.
Absolutely. Yeah. 100%. With the 2013 show, that was Rise. Very cool show. Such a cool show.
Everyone says that. Not a goddamn person could clap for us every show that summer, but that's fine. That's so fine. I love that it aged well.
I definitely remember it being like the coolest thing. Like I remember 2013, like you guys run out of the tunnel And like I remember like we're just waiting, like, oh, here comes Boston, like we're waiting in the tunnel. And just to like see you guys like running out. Like I was on the edge of my seat the whole time. Like I still remember today as a kid where I was sitting, like way up in the 300s, like watching you guys run out of the tunnel. I was like, that's sick. And like especially like the whole like ripping off the jacket for the I Will Rise. I mean, that's an iconic part of the show, obviously. Like that's the one that everyone's like, yeah, that's the moment right there. But for you, like what was, I don't even know how to like ask this because there's so many cool parts of this show. Like what was that like? I guess like coming from this feels like more of a, I don't know how to say it, but more of a like theatrical type of show, I guess, from 2012, which I guess is also like with the activity like evolving at that point. What was that like for you performing this type of show compared to 2012?
Good question. I feel like there's a lot of different ways I could take this, so I'm going to answer your question very literally.
Mm-hmm.
The demand was so fatiguing. It was so hard. Our driller was very much under the belief that like if it's hard, it's only good if it's hard. And it's like, well, actually, the Blue Devils can do quite well when being on and split. Like they can have like drill that like, you know, rather than having, there was drill that we had that was like asymmetrical. It was symmetrical, but it was like a step and a half off the 50. It was like where the center line went. So there was no field map that we could use for any of our forms. And it's like, what are we doing? What are we doing? That show was just the path of most resistance. Like that was the design idea, was like, we can't do anything that's expected. We have to subvert every expectation, which in theory sounds great and sounds like a great idea to succeed.
Until you're the one doing it.
And it's you have to sprint out the tunnel, and then you have to, as soon as you fall on the ground, you have to pick up your 35-pound tuba, and you have to have 20 drill sets before anyone else even rises up and plays, because we're going to start with a tuba fugue. So the tubas have to be the longest. And so like I have a very jaded experience that summer because it was just so fucking hard, and for such little, not as much effect as it could have had.
See, that's why I asked, because like these types of shows are ones for me where I'm just like, this show and like 14 are shows where I'm like, yeah, was so cool. Like 14 is a top 5 show for me, and my brother's like, fuck off, and I'm like, yeah. And I'm like, no, I love that show for real. Like I love it. He's like, I hate you. Like that was the hardest thing I've ever done. And so that's why I ask, because I'm just like, that looks so cool for us as fans who get to watch it, but to ask the performers who actually did it, like, because it's such a cool, like there's so many cool moments in it, just like what that experience was like for you, because it looks cool to us, but you guys were like, that was one of the hardest things ever.
Yeah. I mean, 2013 was probably the coolest show I've ever performed in hindsight. I am grateful for that, and grateful for that experience. And I'm grateful that like my kneecap dislocated after that summer, and that I wasn't able to march 2014, because I probably, because I remember I went to some of the audition camps in 2014, and they talked about how like they understood that in 2013 there was so much hard drill that didn't yield much effect, and so 2014 they're going to be, they're going to make it easier. Like if you're not in the visual focus, you're not going to be doing hard stuff. Cut guys running in the back and no one fucking looks at them. And it's like, I'm so glad I didn't have that experience, and I'm also watch it and take it all in, because it's all, Animal Farm is also a top 5 show for me. That's just so, it works on so many levels, but the misery of performing that, I'm too much of a baby to make that feel worth it. I don't know.
You're like, I'm okay with not doing that. Actually, you guys did so good at putting that out. I'm so happy for you. Look at, you're glowing again. Back to another golden hour.
A golden hour. Absolutely.
Love it. Loving it. Do you remember like a favorite, like, do you remember, oh wait, I wanted to ask another question first. What was the, because I don't know the full story of it, but like I heard bits and pieces, but what was the whole penalty situation about in 2013 with you guys? Because that creates the story for 2014.
So fun. Okay, so I remember we were at the all women's college in Virginia. Oh God, no, not Rollins College. Is it Rollins College? That might be Orlando. I don't know. We were at this all women's college rehearsing, where they had the saunas in the locker rooms. That doesn't matter. That just happened to be my favorite housing site that we went to every year.
That's awesome.
But I remember that night, like that, we had like a rehearsal day or two. It was near the dog show, the Salem show, and we added in this effect. Lamar, the guard caption head, Lamar Branson, he was like, hey, we're gonna add baby powder when you guys run in, and we're gonna put baby powder into silks. So like when they first opened, the idea of like smoke and explosion. And so we did that, I think, for the dog show. We did that for every show in the last 2 weeks. We did it for Allentown, and there was no penalty. We never had a penalty assigned. There was, as far as we understand, no one ever said like, oh, this is possibly breaking the rule. And then we do quarterfinals with Lucas Oil, and that's the famous footage of us running through the tunnel and the smoke.
That was like the coolest thing. I was like, why? This is one of the coolest things ever. Like, why? And like, I remember everyone being like, they got a penalty for that. Like,
yeah. So there's rule saying something about like it makes like an unsafe slick surface, like a particle, anything that's like particulates, any sort of powder that's in the air that settles on the ground can make it slippery and dangerous for other performers. But I think there is a clause in there that's something like, it's up to the discretion of each venue to decide whether or not this is safe or unsafe. And I think it's like exclusively a no in Lucas Oil. But it's like no one ever told us that before, as far as I can gather. And so we got that 2-point penalty. And I remember like them telling us that we're not going to do the baby powder the next 2 shows. And you're like, what? We're like, no, we have to do it. That's like a necessary effect.
Yeah.
And that's when I more about the politics involved, where they're like, well, like one of the techs, Tony Rideout, Ride or Die, he's amazing.
Yeah.
Just what a name. He was this, he taught me so much about what it means to be a gay person. That came out wrong. What it meant to be a gay person. To use your gayness as a coaching tool, as a way to engage your students.
I love you, Dan. I love you, Dan.
You would love Tony. Oh my God, the things he said. But he was like kind of a mentor, and I remember him being like, he always called me Ben. He thought I looked like Ben, so he always called me Ben Daniel. Now Ben Daniel. So if we use the baby powder again, they're going to increase the penalty, and that could potentially put us out of finals. And so it's like, it was so frustrating though, because I think we were 8th pre-penalty, and then we got put down to 10th because of the penalty, which meant that for semifinals, we performed as if we were 10th place. We jumped up to 9th, and then finals night, we went from 9th to 8th. But it's like, we never had that penalty, like all season.
Where we could have gone.
We could have beaten the Cavaliers again. And like, it was us, Madison, and Cavaliers neck and neck all season. And we could have gotten 7th, but we got 8th. And it's like, that also affects things like where you rank depends on how, affects how much money you receive to perform the next year per show.
Yep.
Like, we lost money because of that. And we also lost priority in like housing sites. So I digress. That's so much, but it's interesting.
I think that's so cool, because like we never hear those parts of it, especially like me being like, I never knew those were factors in like placing. Like I always were just like, hey, just go out there, put the best show out there, like what at the end of the season it's about, so that's what you think about. But like the other outside factors, like those are things I never thought of. Like placement determines like housing priorities, like financial compensation for where you place for the next season, stuff like that. I think that's cool, and I think that's things I want to get into for later. But for right now, a little nerdy question about 2013. When you guys, like, obviously it's a really cool effect when you're in the tunnel and no one can see you, and then you start running out, and that's where the effect happens. At other shows like Allentown, for example, like, did you guys still do like a same like kind of like huddle set in a way, or just like a blob set and then just ran out of the back corner still? Or was it a different type of set for non like tunnel stadiums?
That's a really good question. I actually am not even sure.
That's a really nerdy specific one. So if you're like, I don't know, I don't mind.
Well, there's 2 things. One is I almost wonder maybe we didn't actually have baby powder like on ourselves until the performance, until Lucas Oil. But I think the powder only existed like in the silks, like the way that the guard would wrap up their silks and set them on the sideline. It was set up so that when they first picked them up, it's like you see this cloud of dust there, but not like when we run out. And also with Allentown, so like Lucas Oil, we enter from the back corner of side 1.
Yeah.
That was like the default for like 80% of all the shows we did. But then if we ever came like Allentown, it's the back corner of side 2.
Yeah.
So I think that one, it's sort of like we had to practice a different way of running onto the fields. So it's like, at least if Lucas Oil, it's like, the tubas are closest to the tunnel, so it's like they have the least amount to run, and like that's where the drill starts, and then the baritones pick up, and then the mellophones and the trumpets. But then like running from Allentown, it's like now the tubas have to book it as soon as they get to the dot, then they stand up and march. And it's like, that was annoying. That's not part of your question, but
that's still really cool though. Like, these are things I didn't know. So I always wonder, like, I watch the video and I'm like, that's so much, like, that has to be planned for them to get out of that tunnel. Like, the tunnel isn't there every show. So I was like, to get that all together logistically, like, kind of just how that worked. Just a little curious thing. But for the 2014 season, you said something that you like. Do you want to tell the story of, like, kind of how, like, or why you took off the 2014 season?
Oh yeah, so
just real quick, just to catch us up.
Yeah, so after my first summer of marching drum corps, I realized I had no understanding of my body. I was well aware of that already, actually, but I decided to do something about it. So I started taking dance classes. And then, like, I basically just fit as many dance classes as I could around my major required courses. So I was in this dance ensemble, and we were having a dress rehearsal for a performance. And so, like, I'm in this, like, crop top and, like, leggings to match all the girls that I'm dancing with, because naturally I'm the only guy in the group. And I'm this thing where it's like I'm standing on one leg and doing, like, a plie. But it's like my knee went that way and my kneecap went that way. And then I just fell on my ass. And then I spent the next 8 hours in a dance belt in the hospital, like, in the ER getting, whatever.
Oh my God.
When they say knees over your middle toes or out towards your pinky toes, they're not lying. Listen to
They mean it.
Yeah, they mean it.
They're real about it. So with the 2014 show, that is where, for, I guess, on my side of the story, that's where my brother starts marching Boston in 2014. So I, just a quick, I've had him on the podcast already. He was the first episode out of the gate because it's my brother. It makes sense. If it wasn't for him, I'm not here. But 2014 Animal Farm, very cool show. Just kind of giving you guys, the listeners at home, just a little bit of, like, just some little nuggets, I guess, about the show. What we had been talking about earlier with the whole G7 conversation. I guess should I talk about that? I don't know if I should, like, go into the whole details of it. I definitely could, but I know that there was a YouTube channel that definitely describes it in a great way. CJ's Music. He does a lot of, like, history of DCI YouTube videos. So he does a whole deep dive on the G7 story, specifically with the Boston Crusaders in that 2014 summer, and kind of the little, like, Easter eggs that are in the 2014 show that are talking about the G7 story. So for time purposes, I'll put that link again for that video in the description of this video, like I did for the first episode of this podcast. So I'll put the link for that video in the description. You guys can go watch that, get into all that. I could tell the stories, but we're here for Dan today. So we're here for Dan. We're going to hop on to the 2015 season. So what was it like for you now coming back? First off, how long did it take to recover from your knee injury?
It was still a little wonky, honestly, for 2015. I feel like it was maybe by 16 or 17 where I stopped feeling, like, any sort of knee pain. It was fine, especially in 2015, because that was a joke in terms of, like, the visual demand, and also, like, we did bent leg. If we didn't do bent leg that summer, for that one and only summer of Boston's history, I probably wouldn't have survived, honestly. But thank God we did.
Can we talk about, like, why was because I mean, I didn't think it was a big deal because I hadn't marched drum corps yet, but why would you, on a anniversary year, like, change the technique? Because not only, like, you guys did that in 2015, but, like, Cavaliers just did that, like, this past year or the year before. Again, like, brought in new staff, a whole new regime for the anniversary year. And, like, I think even Blue Knights did the same thing in 2018, 60th anniversary show, changed the whole regime. And I'm just like, why are we changing the approach on the anniversary here? Like, what was this like for you coming in? And you're like, okay, like, first off, was there anywhere else besides Boston that you were trying to go for your age out where you just like, no, I'm going to go back home for the age out?
It's funny. So 2013, I had such a miserable experience that summer that I was like, I'm done with drum corps. Like, fuck this. I'm out. Whatever.
This shit hurts.
Yeah. Like, and I say that, and I still auditioned for 2014 and still went to, like, I think, like, 1 or 2 camps until I was like, I think it was like by February where I was I was like, I'm just done. I'm done. So the summer I had off and I went to Allentown that year, I went with my friends to see the Blue Devils rehearse, and that was Fellini-esque. So we saw like their ensemble, and it's like, here's like a 20-minute break for when we see leisurely all the Blue Devils just walking to the field, and they took their time. They were so relaxed, so unhurried, and I was like, this isn't drum corps. Like, what do you mean?
What is
this? Run like. And then like they did ensemble, and they're like, okay, we're just gonna we're gonna
relax.
super relaxed. And the information that came from the box was so eloquent and directed and targeted, and like literally every person in the box gave 15 individual comments, and like they just did a production run of like a whole movement. And it's like, how do you retain all this? Like, these are geniuses here. And it was just, drum corps was fun again. I was like, this could be a wholly different experience. Yeah. So I booked my flight and my audition for Blue Devils, but then I never practiced that fall. I literally did not do it at all. And I was like, it was like 2 weeks before. Like, I'm probably not going to make it. There's only one spot open. So I switched my flight to Orlando, and I was like, I'll just be easy for my Ageout. I know I got to.
So and easy. Oh my god! Like, now looking at like 13 and 14, and then what 15 was. Like, I'm not going to say it was a bad show. You can if you want to, but I feel like I feel like you're going to say that because my brother says the same thing. And everyone who I know who marched with him says the same thing. But it just feels like for a 75th anniversary show of such a storied, like, historic corps, I feel like it was just played so safe. Like, looking back on it retrospectively. But, I'm neither here nor there. I wasn't there. So, who am I? But for you, what was that like, knowing coming back, you're like, this is the Ageout. It's the 75th anniversary of this drum corps. Like, what was that like for you? Because there's so many cool things that got to happen in this summer that you guys got to do. So like, what was this experience like for you?
Yeah, honestly, it probably was the most fun. I think 2012 was like my favorite summer that I marched, but 2015 was the fun that I had, because it was like, not only was I an Ageout, I also graduated college. Like, I graduated, and the next day I was at move-ins. Like, I missed like the first day or two, and it was like, and there were I think there was like 10 vets, or maybe it was just 10 Ageouts. It was like a small number of like us, and a lot of us had been 12. So it was like, okay, like, I'm not the new one here. All these other kids, and also all the staff, they're the new ones. So like, I feel like I know the people that, like, the volunteers and the alumni that come back and have such like a huge presence, and especially the alumni that have been there since like the 70s, the 60s, the 80s. It was just fun to feel in such familiar territory, and also kind of like, I'm never going to get taken. I don't know. So I was definitely a shithead. But it was just so easy to get away with anything. Like, when it was an easy summer, but it was also super.
I can feel you being like, I want to tell this story.
So my thought, I will say, this is shady, and I don't mean to. This is not shitting on anyone I marched with. This is just like, I still have question marks in my head about the staff. Like, I seriously feel like, given the auditionees, I really do feel like the caption heads just threw every auditionee's names in a hat, and whoever they drew, they got a contract. Like, there were kids that got cut that marched cadets that summer. Like, there were
what?
Like, there were Phantom, I think. Like, there were so many talented people that did not march Boston that auditioned, and I'm like, how? I don't know. But even if we had the most excellent horn line, we did not have the most excellent instruction and design. I'm being such a bitch. There's so many.
It's okay. This was your experience, and your experience is valid,
Hey, if anyone that's listening, if I marched with you, or if you taught me, I'm probably not meaning this directly at you. I'm just a bitter bitch. And bitter person, I wouldn't have made me the loving teacher I became. So thank you for suffering my attitude. Anyways, but we got to march the Boston Pride Parade. So like, for me, that's fabulous. We got to perform at Tanglewood with the Boston Pops and the Blue Devils. That was amazing. And just the 75th anniversary, like, there was just so much alumni support, and there was so much, like, it was just an easy summer. It was fun. It was fabulous.
Absolutely.
The world.
Absolutely. And speaking of the shitheads, I think we have to, since now you're coming back in 2015, we have to talk about him, because now you get to meet my brother in 2015. He just marched in 2014. He goes to march on 2 more summers, but you meet him in 2015. what's your first impressions and what was he like in 2015? I have to know from your perspective because I remember it was so funny. I'll never forget it. We were in Pennsylvania and in 2016. We were in Pennsylvania and we finished a Vis block in the morning and we were going to lunch. And I was just walking with my water jug or whatever. And you came up to me and you're like, Jeffrey, you're so much better than your brother. And you just kept walking. And I sucked. Like I was bad in 16. I was like, what? I'm like, oh, I'm just doing this. And you're like, no, you don't get it. You don't get it.
You really didn't suck. You had so much energy and effort, and it was like you had some like shoulder things, and other than that, you weren't me, so you weren't first, so it was fine. Jason he never tried, and like, don't get me wrong, I love a tuba player that doesn't try. That's my favorite part about playing the tuba. Is that
dude, I love them.
you get by with like, how can you make it? How can you pass as putting in enough effort when you're putting in as little as possible? You know. That's fierce. I respect that. But he would just like actively make things. He would complain about how hard things were, or like complain about having to do things. And it's like, Jason, we all have to do this job. Jason, we're all just shut the fuck up. I don't care about the little problems. Like you and Sam Benias can't just skip because you just like think that you're not better than everyone. Like I'm the section leader. I'm the one. I'm in the trenches with you, but you're not even in the trenches with me. Like, who do you think you are?
Who are you? How many times did you have to yell? You were the section leader, so how many times you were like, yo, Jason, get your shit together?
I can't even remember. All I remember is just being mad at him like all the time. We're just like, I think I did. Here's the thing. I like everyone I meet. I think basically everyone I meet, I am always going to like good faith interpretation.
Yeah.
But then it was just like after a month or two, I'm like, you're kind of the worst one in the section. Like, who are you to complain or call? Like, shut the fuck up. And so there's ultimately an endearing quality that I have for him. Like, I feel like I love him in the way that I would love a brother. And it's like, I say all of this with like ultimately from my heart. And it's like, I don't hate him, but I am. God, did he make me just so fucking annoyed? Like,
I mean, like Sarah Myers told me the same thing. So like he had a comeback story. Like I know he had his time, but like he had a comeback. Like yeah. I heard the whole Jason 2.0 stories from like when I went back to Boston and like auditioned again and met everybody. They're like, yeah, like your brother. All of a sudden, one day he just woke up and like flipped the entire thing, and he was just a completely different everything. And I was like. Like I remember hearing that when I had first started drum corps, and he had done 5 years, so I was like, dude, he did 3 years at Boston, like that must be pretty good, right? And everybody who I met, they're like, yeah, it was until Jason 2.0, he just made the flip, and then we don't even know who he was. I was just like, oh wow,
yeah, nice form. I hear that was his catchphrase. Yeah,
nice form all the time. I never get it. I don't know why. I even asked him, I'm like, why nice form? He's like, we just said it all summer.
From what I gather, 2016 was a miserable experience for most people at Boston. I guess out in the end for them, they made finals, but the push together was so hard, and it sounds like, like the levity, the lightness, that like just
he was the fun, goofy guy for sure. He was like the personality hire at the drum corps.
literally. I would pay to perform, and I just would pay to not have to march with him. That's really.
No, it's like, here's the thing. Like, you say that all about his marching and everything, but he was friends with like everybody. Like every time, like we ever like in 2016, like even in 2015, like if we saw him for like, I remember 2016, we like went out for the free day and we're all there for the San Antonio free day. And like literally every 5 seconds after like saying hi to somebody, like Jason, like every 5 seconds, oh hey. And so I'm like, dude, he knows, like wow. And then you're like, you're so much better than him. I'm like, what? He knew everybody 5 minutes. They're like, nah, he sucked.
He really
was so funny.
Yeah, and that's what's cool about Boston, especially Boston pre 2017 before they bought their staff. It's like you got.
I love how you just slid that one in there. That's awesome. Good for you.
Like it's just. That was the best part about Boston. It was like it ultimately the family aspect of like once you got a contract, you essentially never were cut. I mean, that's not always true, but it's like, you know, people like him make that group special. Like he made Boston in a way where it's like if you go to, I don't know, the Cadets or the Blue Devils, like you don't have the chance to leave that impression or to affect the quality of everyone else's experience. You just fit into the product designed by these other great people, which great experience. It's just a different one.
100%. Absolutely. So for the 2015 season, kind of going back and forth, but for 2015, like you said, I mean, you had Tanglewood, you had, the hat shell, 4th of July with the pops, so many like cool things. I was there for the 4th of July with the pops. Like, it's kind of crazy, full circle moment. Like, I was there with my parents. We watched the 4th of July. So it's so funny because I remember sitting there and be like, wow, look at that. This is crazy. So it's cool. It's cool, the full circle moment. But for you, what was like, maybe I don't know if it was one of those or maybe even something small, but what was like a memory that sticks out to you still from that Ageout year?
Man, there's so many good ones. One of my favorites was at the Hat Shell, actually. So for those who don't know, the Hat Shell is like this iconic like amphitheater in the Boston Harbor. And it was just so neat to be there and like behind the scenes. Like Boston was there to like, we bum rushed the stage at the end of 1812 Overture and like to flank the and just like play the last reprise of that. And so we spent the rest of the time just like twiddling our thumbs, waiting for everyone else to perform that night until we were part of the finale act. And I just remember it was just so neat to just like sit and watch the harbor, sit and see the skyline of Boston. And there's also like, as hired artists for this, there was like, the tent with all the food and all the ice cream, and like you're not allowed to eat in uniform. And it was so funny to like, we had like, I remember being with my buddy and like we walked towards like the ice cream. We're like, okay, we're just like gonna get some ice cream, not tell anyone about this. And then like as we're at, we see like the drum majors, it's another pair also approaching the ice cream chest, and we just look at each other. We're gonna not talk about this. It was I feel like it's so fun to break the rules, and I feel like that summer was an opportunity to. It's not about obeying the rules; it's just about not getting caught, and it was just fun to. I think that summer was the most Bostonian Boston experience I got to have, and it made it especially sweet because literally 2 months after that moment, I had no idea, but I moved to Boston, so it's like, it was just awesome to have that taste and have that to romanticize that experience, that city.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Almost like, what's the word for it? You're almost like, it's almost like you had that moment, like sitting there of like, what's the word for it? It's like you're manifesting like what came next. You're like, 2 months later, I moved here. It's like, oh my God, I was just looking at this whole thing. Funny how life works sometimes. But you said that you were a section leader in 2015. Was that your only year, by the way? I'm going to guess by taking off 14, or did you do 13 as a section leader?
13. So I would say 2013 and 2015, I was like co-section leader. Like it was never, I was always like kind of a section mother. Like I always ran like the logistics and like made sure like we twos together and stuff. But like there was always someone buffer or more masculine and intense that would like, sort of exemplify how to hold the horn. And so, but in 2012, there was 4 of us 2-year vets that were there. So I was just so a student, like,
What did you learn about yourself in that role of a leader of like a group of people? What did you learn about yourself?
In 2013, I learned that it's really hard to be a leader when you're not much experienced in the people around you. Like a second year, not an adequate section leader candidate. They just don't have enough experience yet. But for 2015, it was just... there was one experience where there was a kid I marched with that I just made his life absolutely miserable. I was like the angriest I've been in like the last 9 years was one night that summer where he was always never focused on like the hard stuff. He was never focused on getting better. He was never focused on like rehearsing. It was always focused on like the scores and like, my stepdad judges, and he says that like we could beat Phantom and Brass, and it's like we can beat Phantom and Brass if you fucking practiced. Yeah. And it's like, but I was just such a dick to him, and so I there was one night where he like was sick for 2 rehearsal days in a row, and then at the end of the 3rd day he runs out to do the full run. It's like, you're not doing the full run if you miss all the rehearsal this week.
You can't.
No. And so afterwards I made him stay with my co-section leader, and like I made him hold his 35-pound tuba a carry, and I just yelled at him and yelled at him and yelled at him, and it was the most villain-esque I ever was, the most inhumane, the most vicious I've ever been. And so that experience really stuck with me. I still feel guilt about it to this day because it's just like not who I want to be. It was not appropriate to. I think that was the beginning of real recognizing the difference between like hating a person versus like hating their actions. Like you can hate actions, but the person themselves still deserves dignity and respect. And I feel horrible that happened, but so I learned
growing pains of like learning to be a section leader, though. I think there's always like I had the same like kind of like journey of like when I first got the whole. I was like 16 or 17, and I was like high school. Like I had already done 2 years of drum corps, so for me, I was like, oh, I'm the shit. Like I had done 2 years of drum corps. I'm a trumpet player. I'm like lead. I'm better than everybody. So like I had the same whole thing of like I thought I knew everything. So like the whole like talking down to people. Like I used to like give my marching band like pep up speeches before like competitions, thinking I was like, I don't even know, like the head coach of a football team or something. Like I thought I was the band director, and I was just like, no, you're a junior in high school. Like get out of here. So I think it's cool. It's cool to see kind of the progression of, especially like you going on to teach. I think that was so like, that's so crucial for you to learn as like a leader for those things later. So I think that's really cool. But kind of reflective questions of your performance career I want to talk about, because there's so much to talk about within your teaching career, but something like reflective questions of your performance career. I want to ask you, what ended up being, we talk about this a lot throughout, especially when a summer feels like it's getting long, especially like on a tour. If it starts feeling long or whatever, you start to talk about like your why, like why you keep getting up every day. Why do you keep going to block? Why do you keep doing this every day? So for you, you did 12 and 13, you have the knee injury that puts you up for 14. You're like, maybe I'm done with this thing. You come back and fit. Like what ended up being your why at the end of your performance career?
So like going into 2015 or like to continue staying in the marching arts after 2015?
I guess like going into 2015. Yeah, that probably, because we're talking about the performance career. So yeah, like why yes. Yeah.
In the end, I think there was something about like, it is my Ageout, it is my last opportunity to do this. And it's like, I think I do want to do this again. I think it would be worth it. So it was, on one hand, it was like the fear of missing out, literally. But then also it was sort of the hope, the aspiration of like, I wanted to be a full-time visual person. I wanted to be a name in the activity visually.
Yeah.
And so the more experience I could acquire, the better. And the more people I could meet, the better. And it really worked out for me because one of my staff members was the ever famous, the shoeless Josh Dawes. And so if I had marched Blue Devils, I don't think I would have had any of the career that I've had. It was meeting Josh and getting that connection with this person that like saw the activity like I did. Like I remember the first camp I went to for that 2015 season, so Josh was the visual caption at that point, the newly hired. And the first thing he said was that marching is a form of dance. And I was like, this is the guy. I want to take dance and teach from that lens. And that's how it So that really helped my why, meeting him.
Absolutely. I wanted to ask, I could go in two different directions here, but I think I'm going to go this route. Did you ever receive any advice about the transition from member to teacher? Because you went into teaching right away after your Ageout year. So did you ever receive any advice about going from a member to teacher, like what that's like? And if so, like what was the best advice you received?
Literally, no, I didn't receive any. Like
you're just like, I want to teach. I'm going to go do it somehow.
Yeah, I mean, so much of my teaching is like, I mean, the content, the technical information. A lot of the dance information I got from like my dance teachers in college. A lot of marching information I've absorbed from watching other teachers teach. But in terms of the advice of actually teaching, I might be so. I feel like I gain more from observing the character of people I admire more than I explicit. Like I can't think of anything that like shifted gears for me of like, other than like hearing Ryan Springler say anything like. That's just like as a human and like, the way he expanded my brain. So
absolutely 100%. Last thing to kind of wrap out, just in like your performance career. Actually, no, I'm not going to performance career. We're going back. I'm sorry. My brain is scattered all over the place today, but I did want to ask, how did the Oregon Crusaders come into the picture for you?
So, graduated college, Ageout of drum corps. I was home for like 3 weeks in Syracuse, New York, and I knew I needed to get out. And so I was like, I need a place that has public transportation because I didn't have my license then. Didn't have my license until 3 weeks ago.
Nice.
And I was like, I need a place that has like arts in an art scene. I want to be a dancer. So it was Boston, New York. I ended up moving to Boston. And then I started this temp job like 3 days later. And I was literally in day one of the orientation. And I was like, wow, like this is happening. I'm starting a new job. I'm like done with band, like whatever. And then I just get a text from Josh Dawes saying like, how would you like to do band in the Northwest? And I was like, son of a bitch. Like, at that moment, like this job that I had started, it was like, I'm going to have to quit it to do drum corps next summer. This is exactly what I wanted, and it's happening.
How, like, being on the Northeast, and like, did you move at all before the 2016 season, or was it just like, I'm going to travel and just go do this thing?
It was, so I lived in Boston for, I moved there September of 2018, and then I was working the same job through May of 2018, and then I moved out of my apartment. I moved some of my items, my belongings, to a friend's house, and like that was living in Boston, and I took whatever I needed with me, and I just went to Oregon from May through August, and did every single day of the tour, and also the May camp, and also the 4 days between May camp and move-ins, and then when I came back, I moved into a new apartment. So, I never actually left tour. I didn't have a single day off that summer.
You're like, I didn't stop. I just keep going. So it's like, this is the next thing.
Yeah, exactly.
Absolutely. So now going into the 2016 season, this is where I kind of come in, and I auditioned for Boston that season, didn't make it. I auditioned for Troopers. I didn't make it. And then I'm like, I don't know if I'm going to do this summer. I just got told in my Troopers audition, like, I don't have the potential to march. So I'm like, I don't know if I should do this summer. Like I got told, like, you should probably sit out a summer, honestly. Like, I don't think you should go do it. I think you should sit out and like wait and go next year. So I'm like, well, shit. But I honestly, I wanted to do world-class drum corps so bad in my rookie year. Like I wanted to march so bad because it was my brother's Ageout. So for me, I was like hell bent on like, I need to march world-class drum corps somewhere. So, I send the email out, send the tape in, and then I get into the Oregon Crusaders. So that's, we're doing great. And now I get there, and I remember my brother's like, hey, Dan Hoffman, I marched with him. Look out for him. Like, say hi. Say that, I marched with him. Like, he'll know me. Like, get yourself in there. Like, introduce yourself. Like, he'll look out for you, all that. So I was like, okay, cool. So what was it like for you knowing that you had to be with another Rekis for a summer? When you found out, you're like, shit, he's got a brother, dude.
I think I knew your fit. I think I didn't know that was happening. Or maybe Jason did give me, I honestly don't remember if I got a heads up or not. Like my earliest impression.
I don't even think so. At that point in 2016, I was so quiet. Like my brother was like, go talk to Dan and tell him I marched with him, and then he'll know you. And I was like, I saw Dan. I remember I was like, that's Dan. Okay, cool.
Right. I feel like I saw you somewhere, and I was like, oh, this must be the brother. And like, you have the same exact face. And so I think I probably was like, are you Jason's brother? And you're like, yes. But the way, the fact that you never talked is so funny. No, but I never had a single negative idea. I mean, just your energy is just completely different, or at least was completely different. And like, thank God, like we can work with this.
Oh my goodness. Had you ever, before this season in 2016, had you ever like done any like high school teaching or anything like that before going into a season of drum corps?
Yeah, that's actually a really good question. Maybe that's something that made me less anxious about finding advice. Was I taught my alma mater loosely, like the 2 weeks between drum corps and college in 2012 and 2013, and then 2014 home. I was there for like 6 weeks over the summer. So I had a fairly extensive experience teaching. And then 2015, when I moved to Boston, I started it was midway through the fall, but like Jackie Gaffney at Oregon, I marched with her. She's like, oh, you live in Boston now? Do you want to teach my band? So I show up to the band and like teach these fucking like 12 kids how to march. So I had a good amount of experience, especially with kids that had no visual movement experience whatsoever, which was perfect for what Oregon was.
Almost the same way.
And that was it was so also kind of like anxiety reducing was that
Yeah.
we were teaching like I think that visual staff at Oregon like not I'm not saying we could teach better than any other team in DCI, but my God, there is a much harder, different experience of teaching at the ground level of like this is your left foot and then the other one is your right foot. Like the amount of kids that cut from multiple organizations that were 15, 16 that had never marched before, literally in even high school, like Quinn on Canada,
Quinn
like
Fleming.
Quinn Fleming. And he's badass for, he got himself to Boston next year. So it was just this disparity of talent and who we had to teach. We had to teach the fundamentals of movement, but we had to also teach in a way that made the kids safe to try new things, to push themselves harder than ever before. Like, talk about a Tracy Kidwell. Like, I remember one time going up to her and moving, and like she didn't know that I was approaching her. So like I literally started, and she like got so startled and she actually started crying.
My goodness.
Like, what? Like the level form emotionally just to even then give the most scrutinizing technical information that could actually translate. It was just it was fun because it was all an experiment, but it was also like as long as we just made sure that we were kind to start, like that. It's where I learned that you can just, as long as you're teaching from love, there's honestly no way to really be at fault.
Absolutely. I think so. Absolutely. I think so too. Like just coming with that positivity and like, obviously like, there's corrections that, have to be made or just information that has to be brought up. But as long as it's coming from a place of like love and you're giving this feedback out with like the best intention, I think that's all that can matter at the end of the day. I taught for only just like one season, but I learned just from that because I had so many instructors in my time. I had all different types of instructors, like people who were very like East Coast regimented, where it was very like intense, hard, like screaming in your face. And like that can be very scary. And I've also had teachers who are very like, there's no reason to do all of that. And like, I can explain all of this information in the same type of way, just in a more like calming tone. So I think it's just like, I think everyone's got their own things, but I think that's what made you guys so special and why like we all as like a group every season like loved doing Viz blocks with you guys, because like there were times where you guys were just like, like you're not doing this well, like, or you're not doing it right. And like, sorry, I heard a car, but like, let's get back on track here. Like, but like you guys always just like, you looked out for us and you always came with like the most love. And I think that's what it came across. And that's why I think why we're always like Viz team's the best team, but I wanted to know, coming to a core like Oregon from a place like Boston, where, Boston has this, really storied history, has a really deep like alumni fan base, or just an alumni base overall, that donates to the organization. You have all these events that get put on and people come and watch you guys, and you have all of these resources at a place like Boston to really help your group out. What was that like now, teaching in the activity and coming to a place where maybe all those things aren't there?
It was definitely eye-opening. Like, I feel like the quickest way to summarize it was kind of like showing up to Oregon was like, damn, y'all really live like this, huh? Like, the most ramshackle operation, like the brass staff taking turns serving meals for the kids. There not being enough for not even that there wasn't enough for seconds for anyone, but there wasn't even enough for firsts for the staff. Like Gino Monticelli buying me and Carlos Martinez a meal one time because it was like, oh, I know that like there's not enough food for the kids, so I'll just take you to dairy. Like that was wild, but I loved it because like to me that was like the roots of drum corps. That's like when I think Boston mythology, it's like in it was like 1978 when there were only 25 kids and their motto was 25 and still alive. And it's like stories we heard from alumni nights being like, we drove ourselves there wasn't a bus, like we drove ourselves to the shows, our own like propane camping stoves, and we made cold cut sandwiches. And it was like, to me, it was like, oh, this is kind of like old school. This is kind of fun. This is what matters.
We're getting to the roots. We're doing this thing for real, like
Yeah.
without all the extra stuff. So there's more of a challenge to it, you know?
Yeah.
Just a little bit about 2016. We've had people on from the 2016 season. We've had our famous stories about, the Mall of America Day. Everyone's fucking Norovirus story. Like, we've gone through all the famous stories of the season, but I remember yours as I was like writing this down, because like we've talked about everyone's Norovirus story, but I remember yours specifically. And I don't know if you want to talk about it or if you want me to preface it. I think you should talk about it. I really think you should. Because it was like you were in seriously like the worst position of all time. Like, it was like, Dan, you have Norovirus and you're gonna check all these kids' dot books, right? And guess what? None of them are done. And this is your first summer teaching drum course, so you're like, yeah, no problem, I will look at all of these. Yeah, I remember like we were on a lunch, we're like, hey Dan, and you were like, you guys didn't do your fucking dot books.
Okay, so oh my god, that was okay, so I want to talk about how I first got. So this was so it was like the Casper show is the Friday before the Denver show, the Rocky Regional.
Yeah.
And so I remember in Casper, we're driving to the show site, and I took like a 5-minute nap, and then we got to the show site, and I woke up, and I was like, I feel terrible. I felt fine. I don't understand what's going on. And I was fine the whole time, and then like we did like show warm up, whatever, and then I went to I threw up a little bit, and I was like, okay, I'm good. And then I think later that night, while we were still at the show, I remember that week was the week that Pokemon Go came out, and there was a glitch where some people, for some reason, like couldn't log in, like couldn't make an account. Mm-hmm. And I remember like going, like it was like in line for the bathroom, and I was like trying to log this, and then finally, like I get into the single stall bathroom, I lock the door behind me, I open Pokemon Go, and then I am just out of both ends. It's all coming out all at once.
Oh no!
It was so bad. And it's like, and then I look at I like tears in my eyes, and I look at my phone, and I was like, oh, I can use Pokemon Go now. Perfect.
Yes.
And then a couple hours later, we had a buy stop in Walmart, and I was like just getting sicker and sicker. It was like if I drank water, I would throw up, and it was just like, this is horrible. And I remember I didn't really go inside the Walmart, I don't think, but I think I asked Ryan Springler to get me like some medicine or something. And then actually no, I went to go buy medicine, and then I went, I don't know, what, it doesn't matter. But I just remember Ryan's like, hey, do you want this like pita chip with jalapeno hummus on it? And I was like, sure. And I immediately threw it all up. And so we get to Denver the next day, and so I have Norovirus, and then also altitude sickness. So like I'm just delirious. It was so bad. And I think it was Josh Dawes that was like, if you're going to be inside all day, maybe you can just check everyone's dot books.
Check them.
And I was like, absolutely. Why not? And then, like, I don't know when it was. I think Brad Kerr Green walked past me in the hallway. Like, all the other staff were outside teaching, and he was, like, walking past. He's like, oh, what are you doing? I was like, oh, I'm just checking everyone's dot books. He's like, and you have Norovirus, right? And I was like, yeah. So you're just touching.
You're putting Norovirus on all the...
Like
Josh told me to,
and I'm like, you're the scariest man I've ever met. I can't I don't know.
I'm glad you agree. Oh my God. That was the scariest man in my life at 15, 16 years old. That was the scariest man in my life. Like when I'm talking about like East Coast regimented, like yelling in your face, like I remember like he left tour for a period of time. And then it was like the Belton show in Texas. It was the Belton show. I forgot what stadium it's at. It's one of the colleges. But like we're pulling up to the gate, and everyone's been like in a good mood because like Brad's gone. So the tension is like out of the room. So the whole Brad's like, we've been having like a great week. Like mentally, we're all like on fire. We're like, yo, this has been so much fun. And we pull to the gate, and just shades waiting there, arms crossed at the gate. Oregon. They're like, oh fuck. It's over. It's over. All the fun's over. I'm glad you say that.
He's like so funny. He's so smart, and
Yes.
I don't think of him as a scary man. But like when he needs to scare you, let you know it's time for work or that something's wrong, you're gonna shit your pants, and you're
Yeah.
not gonna tell America.
You're not going.
So funny.
Oh my goodness, man. I will never forget it. I will never forget it. But like we always say, we love Brad. We love Brad Kirk Green around here. Listen, he's scary, but it's in the best way. It's with the best intentions.
It's such a good arranger. Oh my god.
Oh my goodness. Absolutely. With the 2017 season, moving on. We kind of talked about this before, but you lucked out in missing a lot of the 2017 season. You were
Yeah.
there for 2 weeks, you said?
Yeah, I only had 2 weeks of vacation time with a new job, so I was like, I
Yeah.
got 2 weeks. And I was so heartbroken at the time. I didn't realize the universe just loves
Oh,
me
I'm
more.
so sorry, guys. It's gonna be the worst ever. No, I'm kidding. It was a summer. It was a summer of drum corps that we did, and we've talked about it a lot. And I talked about this before, but we've talked about the summer of 2017 a lot on this podcast with people who have marched the summer with me. Um, and it's been a lot of negatives. So for this episode, instead of going back into that and kind of just talking about the negatives, I think we're just gonna, go back to the other episodes. Go watch the other episodes with the other people from 2017 because I just don't want to keep bashing it anymore. I just feel like every time I go back to it, I just bash it or talk about it in a negative way. And I think like there were really great parts of that summer. Like example, like Julia Robles coming on the last episode, like without her, Michael Freeney and Everett and all of these other people from that summer. I mean, there was definitely like, there was people that made that summer so much fun in 2017. So like, I know in the past episodes, like we've talked about 2017 and the in-depths of it and why it kind of sucked overall maybe, but I think like there were still some great people and some great times that we got to have. So I just want to put that point because I feel like in so many of my other episodes, I'm like, oh, 2017, I don't remember shit, but we just ran the whole time. We ran the whole summer, it felt like, which we did. And we were loud. And that did happen. But I think overall, again, I guess now that as a staff member, I can kind of bring this up, just that I'll never forget the day in spring training where we got sat down by the staff. And I feel like it was like twice in spring training. We got sat down to kind of like, we got told what the show concept was. And every time we would like listen to the show concept, like we would listen, we would hear all 4 parts and what these parts meant. And then we would get up from the conversation and we would go out to either a dinner or the block or whatever and be like, did you get that? Like, did you get that? Like, we have these 4 different stages, these 4 different moods. It's called Encompass, but what is it? And so everyone's just like, well, we're performing and we are loud. We're louder than last year. So that is cool. That's all it felt like the whole time. So I don't know if you being out like 2 weeks, if you ever got to hear any about it, if the staff, like, I remember like, 2017, obviously the middle of tour, we have Josh Dawes leave in Texas week. So that all happens. Ryan Sprinkler takes over when he comes on the podcast. I want to talk to him about that so bad because like the weight of the drum corps, I felt like got put on him that day. Like it was literally, it felt like, because when we showed up to rehearsal, like there was no Josh and it was just Ryan and he just came down and he was like, everyone just bring it in real quick. And we were just like, okay, so where's Josh? And Ryan's like, Josh is gone. Josh will not be returning for the season. I'm going to be here to, ride the ship out for the rest of the year. So we're going to start and we're just going to like, fix some things up today. And we're just going to go right at it like we normally do. And like, but I feel like retrospectively looking back on that season, because I was only in my second year. So I just knew like, we're with Ryan now. Okay, let's keep going through the block and let's just keep going through the day. This is what we do. But like retrospectively looking back on it now, I feel like a lot of that period of time was like, okay, Ryan, so we're going to fire the visual caption head and we have like these things that we immediately want to change in Texas week on tour of our show, like major parts of the thing. Can you fix that? And it was just like, it felt like that from a member's perspective of like, hey, Ryan, can you and the team just like take this and like fix the whole thing while we're on tour, by the way. And Ryan did, and credit to him because that Vis staff, that Vis team, I felt like really kept us together that summer and really kept our spirits up through that whole tour, because I feel like a lot of people were already starting to like pull away, like even with 2 weeks left in the summer, being like, yo, I'm done with this stuff. Like I'm gone. Some people had some people had great summers. That's why I say like everyone's experience is unique. But I just noticed there was a big divide within the drum corps that summer. And I feel like a lot of people are ready to just get it over with. And so I give a big credit to the Vis staff always at Oregon, just for everything they did. Cause I feel like they were the ones, obviously not 18. I feel like 18, everyone just helped each other in 2018. But 2017, especially, I would say that Vis staff definitely kept us together. So Ryan Springler, oh my goodness, when you come on, we're going to have to talk about that 100%. But moving on into the season that was the 2018 season of the Oregon Crusaders, this is a very I'm so excited to talk about this with you. I know we won't get to talk about everything, but I do want to hear your perspective on this summer. And I don't know if there's any specifics I can just hit. So I just had the question of just what happened? Like for you, what was your perspective of just maybe not, the end parts, but just overall, what happened in this season? Because it just felt so, it was retrospectively, again, you look back on it, and there were so many great people. There were so many great people across staff, membership, amazing people all over. But it just feel like by the end of the season and looking back, it was like, oh, there were some things we didn't know. And there was just things, again, that was another season where I felt like people were already starting to pull away towards the end, be like, let's just get this season over with. And I'm guilty. I was definitely one of them. In Texas, I was like, I gotta get through this. 3 weeks, 4 weeks left. I'm on my way out of here. I can't do this again. I gotta go. So for you, what was your perspective of the 2018 season? Because if I'm correct, I think you were way more involved in this summer, right?
Yes. So I was there the last 6 weeks of the season. So basically, I showed up the very last day of move-ins. I showed up to Cascade High School in the middle of your final ensemble, and then we left that night.
Yeah.
And so I was there for the entire tour. So my perspective, in general, that was probably the closest to a perfect summer that I had teaching drum corps. Just in terms of the amount of trust that I felt from not even just the Vis techs, the other Vis staff, but the entire staff, even from Mike Quillen and Mike Grimes, the administrators, the people running the corps. Funny moments with Jody Rhodes, the show designer. I feel like I was this young 24-year-old that was also taken seriously and given, I felt a real sense of community and bonding. And I especially felt that with the kids as well, because I thought that the membership was just, I contend that show was so devalued by the judges, not because it deserved it, but because of politics. I genuinely, and I have stories that I may or may not share about, hearsay about basically DCI is trying to penalize Oregon Crusaders and trying to get them to either fold or to get them to get Mike Quillen out of there. I think they knew that I said his name. I feel like they knew that he was just not fit for that role of director.
Yeah.
And so I should say executive director. And so that show design, I think, was fabulous. I think
it was great. I think it was a way better idea than 2017. We had a concept and a plan and an idea and this whole theme, and we took the time in the beginning of the season before move-ins to go out to we're out in the cabins out in Oregon, where they filmed the outside of the movie, and we got together as a leadership team, and all the caption heads got together, and we really dove into the show concept and this idea, and then also what our identity was going to be as a drum corps. And it felt really strong, and we were ahead of schedule on move-ins. We were doing everything right. So I was we're doing all the right things. And then we hit tour, and we never got credit for shit. But all the work we were putting in move-ins, I was this is going to be I'm excited. This is a fun show. This is a fun group of people. The way that we learn is the most fun I've had in my 3 years here. The way that we're doing everything, the way that we're putting the show together, it's so much fun. I legitimately believe we're going to be able to seriously compete. I'm excited. And it felt like we never got credit on the road.
Absolutely. And it was such a shame that we didn't get credit, because I think genuinely the educational experience and the actual range of choreography and performance and theatrics that you students learned, I feel was on such a higher level than almost any other group, even most finalists, I would say. Like, the shit that you were doing was so just, not even just that it was demanding, but it was demanding and yet also excellent. Like, I think just because it was so physically taxing, like, you were using the entire field. I think Mark Moreno is a drill genius, and I think the way that he staged everything, the way it all flowed, was just so masterful. And it's like, I wish people knew about the show, because I think in terms of color, in terms of events, in terms of structure and pacing, in terms of choreography, like, it had it all. It was just,
it works. It's so good, and it's fun to watch. Like, I watch it back, and you're like if you watched it and you showed it to anybody and you didn't tell them it got 22nd place, like, people watch the show and they're like, dude, that was so much fun. And you're like, I mean, it was a lot of fun. I mean, they gave us 22nd and we almost didn't make semis, but like, I felt like that was just such a fun show. And like, we were like, for a group our age too, because I felt like we were a very young group, as like a horn line, at least. Like, we were a very young group in the things that we were being able to achieve, but also like attempt as a younger horn line with not a lot of vets in the horn line, to you as a staff to kind of have the trust in us. I felt like, where I was like, they're going for it. Because like last year in 17, for me, felt so much like they were like, okay, so this staff member had this idea that they want to put in this movement, and this staff member has an idea they want to put in this movement, and then we're just going to slap this into 12 minutes and you're going to go perform it all summer. And do you know what it means? No. But we'll tell you we'll tell you the title of each movement, and that'll be enough. And then like 2018, it was like, here, we're going to tell the story. We're going to tell the story, and here's who you're performing as in this part of the show. And like, we're going to have these like acting master classes, like after the day of like getting together with, like, I think it was like Jody or somebody else would come in. I think we literally had like an acting coach come in one time and be like, we're going to go through like all these different emotions we're going to explore in the show. So we were taking the time to prepare all of these things. And I was like, this is going, like, talking about it now and remembering how much we did to get to that first show and to get what we got. Scores aren't everything. And like, I still had a blast with the group of people we were with that summer. But I mean, when you get to Florida and everyone's bitching because we're still in the 60s, it definitely doesn't make it easy. When you're like, when I'm a 3-year vet and like, there's rookies being like, why are we, this sucks. Like, we suck. And I'm like, we don't. Oh my God. And then Lisa Tatum's being like, why is everyone saying we're not going to make semis? And she's yelling at me. She's like, why is everybody saying that? And I'm like, it's a pouring rain. She's telling the Nebraska side. She's like, Jeffrey, come here. Why is everyone saying we're not making semis? And I'm like, I don't know, because we're at 64 right now and we got like 2 weeks left in the season. So like, we're almost going to lose to gold at our next show. So it's like, but it's just I don't know. I feel like everything was like working against us that summer. Whereas in like 2017, I feel like we were just set up for failure, to be completely honest, but not to discredit the designers who worked on that show, because I know there's a lot of hard work and thought that's put into designing a show. I totally understand that. I've never done it myself, so I give all credit to them. But from a member's perspective, that's just how it felt to me. And it felt like we had the plan. We had the idea. We put the work in for it. It's just maybe not even the execution, but just, I guess, the factors that worked against us that summer. I don't know. That was just my perspective.
Yeah, I'm not usually one to just say politics. Usually it's like, well, you have to just be undeniably good in order to earn the score. And like, to be fair, like, no, there wasn't 100% uniform excellence in the most fundamental of skill sets in that show. So a lot of judges, a lot of these straight men just won't care if like it's not like perfectly excellent. Even the gay men too, I'll be honest. Not the women, because there weren't ever women that judged. But it's
so sad. We need it.
Thankfully it's changing and it's growing and evolving. I was having this conversation with Ryan earlier about how we just need, there's like, we need people that are younger that are judging, but and there's such a need for them to grow. That's a totally different topic. It's so funny though to hear, like, it's because you're telling me about this, and I was talking to some other alumnus recently about Oregon, and like, I think it was Brendan Tate fierce.
Oh my God. Wow.
And he
Shout out to Brennan Tate.
he's like a full grown man now. It's crazy.
Yeah.
He's like in the Marine Corps. Wow.
What a man.
So proud of him. But he was telling me about how like he thought the show was just like poorly designed, and I was like, I don't know that anyone that marched that summer had anything negative to say about the show. Like I thought that was just, I was so just committed to it being a good experience for all involved. Like I felt so inspired. I felt so much love and passion, and I loved the show so much. And so so interesting to hear years later. It's like actually a lot of us were miserable. It's like, oh, that's good to know.
But really, it wasn't like it had nothing to do with performing the show. I think everyone loved performing that show. Everyone loved being together and working together. I think that's why like literally today, like, you know, as I'm working throughout the day, like I was still talking to the back of the bus chat from the brass bus in 2018. Like I'm still talking to all these people from Oregon. So it's like, I think it's like, I think people got to reverse, because I talk to people like that too. And they're like, 17 was so good, dude. And I'm like, what? Are we watching the same show? Like, respectfully, I did 16, 17, and 18. And every time, like, when I did my Meet the Bus interviews, and people would be like, yo, rank your top 3 shows, like 17 was always at the bottom, because I was like, guys, it was not a good. And it was like, no, that was such a good show. I'm like, what about it? What about it was like 2018 was a story. We had characters, we had like real emotions that we actually got to explore and like try those things out. And like there was so much, like on top of like a group overall executing like the drum corps things, there was so much individual responsibility that we put on a younger group, like, you know, visual soloists, like doing things with, you know, like the low brass, where it's like hard for them and they're younger people, but they're like you know, just all these challenges. And like we didn't do these things in 17 where we're taking a whole day out of spring training to have a separate designer come out and take just one movement and be like, I'm going to produce this entire movement today. Like we're just going to do this one movement for the day. We never had that in 16 or 17. So like, I'm like 18, they rolled out the carpet and they're like, we're going to do everything we can to like set you guys up this year. So I'm like, I hear that too, where people are like, 18 was just poorly designed. I'm like, it was not the design of the show. We had the idea. Like I literally had this conversation today with somebody and I was like, no. We had an idea in 2018. We didn't have a fucking idea in 2017. We had to ask for the idea like over and over of what's the thing? And like 2018, it was very clear. Like this part is this, and this is what, you know, and it's just, I don't know, just me. But talking about, I think also to say like what you were talking about, the whole like, you know, I don't think we were miserable at some points. I'm not going to lie. We were, but it wasn't because of the show and it wasn't because of the staff or the work we were doing. It was all of like the logistical outside factors that were kind of, I feel like that's the things I'm talking about when I'm saying working against us. I feel like we were doing all the right things and the staff was doing all the right things, but it was the logistical things of like the food, the lunch breaks, like the sleep, stuff like that. And I know you as a staff member, I don't know if you can talk to any of the logistical things that you guys dealt with as a staff, but a story that I do want to talk about, that I think I haven't talked about this story in a while, but the Denver regional. I've talked about this with the members, from our members' perspective, all on the brass bus though. So the only people I've had on and we've talked about it are from the brass bus. Just what happened, and for new people who are watching who haven't watched the older episodes, basically going to the Denver regional. We're driving, we're on our way there, everything's going fine. We're literally like 10-15 minutes from the stadium, and then I'm on the brass bus, so it's like brass bus, another bus, and I think staff bus in front of that. I think staff bus was at the front. I don't remember the exacts, but like our bus in the middle, brass bus, gets hit by the bus behind us, and then that sends us forward into the next bus, and then so all of our buses like crashed. At least that's the way I remember it. I just remember like we get hit, we go forward, we hit the next bus, and everything's just all over the place. But like we're still being told like we're gonna go to the regional, and we're gonna perform the regional, and we're gonna do it, and we're gonna get off the bus, and you're gonna go do it. And I just remember like from me and the members' perspective, I'm getting off the bus, and I see people crying. I see people like holding their head. People are in panic. They'll be like, what are we doing? What is happening? We're looking at the buses, looking at the damage, everything. We're like, yo, we are fucked. We are so fucked. And I want to know from you as a staff member being on the staff bus, what was your guys' reaction, and what did you guys like? What was the move? What was the plan?
As if there was ever a plan. Here's what this was like my experience. So I remember like we're sitting on the side of the road for like the side of the highway for a while, because it's like, oh, why are we stopped? Oh, because one of the buses crashed. What? Is everyone okay? All these questions. And then all I knew is that we were driving like with our flashers on at like 20 miles an hour on like the shoulder highway, and it's like, what the fuck are we doing? Like, why are we? This is so not safe. But later I found out that I guess someone had asked like, hey, Mike Quillen, can you ask DCI if like we could just like hey, we just got in a bus accident. Can we perform later on the schedule? And then from what I heard, this is hearsay, so this can't be used against Mike. But from what I heard, he was like, no, just no. Like, we're going to perform at our set time. Like, we don't want to send a message to DCI that like we're not able to take care of ourselves. Like, we're weak or like whatever, you know.
Oh man.
As if like
we're going to have conversations after recording. We will absolutely do that.
Yeah. And I also know that, I also heard that this was never reported to the police that like this accident happened.
Oh my God.
So later, when our visual soloist had to go home to be to be seen by a doctor, like they weren't able to use that accident like for their insurance claim. So it was just like not on the record.
Yeah. And she was like seriously hurt. Like it was something in her vertebrae. Yeah. I'm pretty sure that was like, it was like a serious, like not just some like bruiser, like she had to have surgery, I'm pretty sure, something along those lines.
Something. And this is like the soloist in our show, and I'm so glad that the parents took them out. But anyway, so we pull into the lot, we park, and at that point, that week it was like me, Sarah Myers, Robert Peterson, and Dave Laughlin. I think there were 3 or 4 of us on that, and it was like in turns, like being like certain roles. My role was always to like escort the kids to the warm-up zone, and then be the visual, the movement warm-up, and then someone else would take over for marching. And so I remember like everyone's getting into twos, and like we're choosing next to the buses, and like directly like in the bus next to us, it's the color guard bus, and there's like, you know, the door of the bus can't open because it's been impacted. So you see all the windows of the bus like fanned out and open, and the drum major ladders up to the windows, and all these girls in these like cotton candy blue like tulle skirts and their little Mary Jane shoes and white stockings, and the black makeup that's on their face is already like even more smeared because of all the tears, like they're crying, climbing down the bus, and it's like all the brass are like in their twos looking in horror and like crying. And I remember just being like, okay, we have a job to do. I promise you anyone who was on that bus that got hurt, I promise they will receive medical attention. You can be assured that they're going to be taken care of. But we have to bring our front drops and the sandbags to the gates. So we're all going to grab our things, and we're going to go choose it to the gate. And then we're going to go to the warm-up, and we're just not going to worry about anyone else. We're good. And meanwhile, I'm like,
do the show.
What the fuck are we doing? This is so insane. It's so crazy. And like the fact that there was no caption head like to refer to, it's like I have to just make all these calls myself. So it's like, okay, this is what we're doing. Okay.
I mean, I like in your brain, are you thinking like you have to take all like personal out of it? You have to be like objective, the show, right? You're like, I have to get them to the gate. I have to get them to work. I have to. That's what we do. We have to. It's a part of the like process for the show. So like I can't even imagine, because like in my brain I'd be like, I feel like I want to say something of like, should we perform?
Well, and it's like I feel like I wasn't old enough to feel like I had the authority to ask that kind of to question at that level. As kind of like I just have to be a follower and do what's expected of me. But I also like my teaching style is always like empathizing with what the kids could possibly feel. Like if there's any reason that they could have any sort of emotional blockage or barrier, I always acknowledge and honor that, because if I can't address that, then we can't get beyond that fear. And so it's that moment, I had no choice but to be mom and to like just address the collective obvious fear of everyone, but just to be like, I'm sure they're going to be taken care of. Like we're not inhumane for doing our job, but like also us just standing there in awe and screaming and crying isn't going to help them either.
No.
But I just remember, so we choose to the gate, and then we choose it back into the parking lot, and like we find our warm-up zone, and I'm like in the middle of like leading trunk twists. Everyone's like munged around me, like doing the visual warm-up, and I see like beyond the perimeter of the clump, I see Ryan Springler and Carlos Martinez had just showed up, and Ryan's like, and I was just like shaking my head like no. And then I remember as soon as that visual warm-up was over, I was like, we need to go to the bar across the street. And so things, I like hit someone's pen as hard as I can, and then go to the bar, and then it's like we sit down, and like I remember like Ryan was like talking to someone else, and so like his back was to me, and like literally like within a minute of like sitting down, it's like I already had 2 shots of Jameson in me, and I was just like, we just like
Ryan.
I can't be sober right now. This is crazy. Like how just. Oh my God.
Yo, good for you guys. Honestly, good for you guys. You guys deserve that. You guys deserve that for the things that you guys did for us in 2018. You guys deserve that.
It was a magical summer. Just everything.
It was. It really was, though. It was magical.
It was the impossible dream. Like we were the Boston Crusaders.
We really did. For the visual team, speaking of you guys, I mean, new people came in throughout, 16 to 18. And I mean, you weren't there for a lot of 17, there for 2 weeks, but like new people always like came in and out, but it felt like the core of like you, Ryan, Carlos, Robert, like those guys, like that was like the consistent core that was like from 16 to 18 always there, and it literally was the best Viz blocks of my life. Like I remember when I went to BK, I went to Blue Nights in 2019. I was like, man, dude, I miss those guys so much because our Viz team was not as fun. No disrespect, because they're doing great things now at the Mandarins, but it was not as fun as the OC Viz blocks in 18 as it was in 19. It was more business in 2019, which hey, we needed that because we were a younger horn line and we needed to be good at marching and we weren't. So, there's that. But for you guys as a Viz team, keeping that core together, new people always coming in and out, but that core is sticking together. And you guys always just seemed like the closest of people, which like you guys taught together, not just in drum corps, but like high school, wherever. How did you guys as a visual team stay so tight through those 3 years?
I mean, literally, it was just like I like these people as people first, Like it was never like I wanted to just network with you and like get your connections. It was just like, here's Ryan Springler. Here's this person who just like he likes all the same art that I do and all the same music as I do, but he likes even more than that. Like he's like I think roughly like 7 years older than me, so he just has so. In addition to just already thinking at a higher capacity, he also has so many more years of wisdom to like just share everything. Like. He was the one that introduced me to RuPaul's Drag Race, and I always was like, I'm gay, but I'm not, and like, but it's like if this guy likes it, I must like it too. And so then I like watched like 8 seasons in like the 3 weeks before move-ins in 2016 to have something to talk. Now I feel like a Drag Race historian. Like I just the amount that in my life that I value and that I care about is so. It is inspired from Ryan himself, and it's never out of like trying to be him. It's just like I'm just genuinely so fascinated with how he sees them.
That's awesome.
And same with Carlos Martinez. Like we initially trauma bonded because we had Memorial Day camp May of 2016, and then the following Fridays when move-in started. So rather than flying out all the staff back home and then flying them back in 4 days later, it's like, oh, you two can, and Dave Landau on brass staff, the 3 of you can just stay at Dr. Phil's house on Sauvie Island outside of Portland. Dr. Phil, not the actual, like, who everyone knows to be Dr. Phil, but Dr. Phil.
Not the TV guy, but our founder. Yeah.
Sure. Yeah. We'll go.
Sure.
Just such a self-important man, and I just like living in this like booby-trapped house of like this guy showing up in this tidy whities like in our presence. It's like just the boundaries were just so. I did not like them, but are to spare us, and so the 3 of us got to go drive around. But it's like at that time I was a lot more closed-minded to people that didn't think like me. So when Dave Landau asked me or proposed in the car ride to Multnomah Falls that like gay marriage should be illegal, I was like, what makes you think I'm the one you should be having this conversation with? Like, and like nowadays I can see the argument he was arguing, which is just that it's a whatever. We don't even have that conversation, but it was just like I was just like, you are not.
Still wild for you to like bring that up on the car. Like, we're all together, we're gonna teach again, and then we're just gonna throw that one out there. Like, let me get a feel for the group out here.
Yeah. So,
what do you think about gay marriage, guys?
And there's like in the back seat, not saying a word, and it's like I just immediately bonded with him that week. Just his skewed point of view and how he sees the world. I've just never met anyone like him. And so just these people were just so amazing. And so we were just best friends. Like it was truly, we were best friends that happened to do the same thing. Yeah. And I think it speaks to the fact that I moved out to Arizona because Ryan kept egging me on, being like, I could have you, there's groups out here you could teach. And finally I was like, yeah, I'd rather be out there in the heat than like in the snow in March. So I literally like moved in, was his roommate living 10 minutes away from Carlos. And then a year later, Robert Peterson moved from New Jersey to here and lived in our garage for 7 months. So
and the whole gang was here.
That
is beautiful. That is so beautiful. Like you guys seriously were the best. Like seeing you guys in 19, I was like, come, please be my Vis staff again. My Vis staff is so mean.
Yeah.
I love them though. They're
good at what they do, but it's just not the same. You know, they're not sweet.
It doesn't hit the same. Doesn't hit the same. No, but moving on for time purposes, just because there's so much, there's more that I want to talk about, more that I want to bring up. And obviously we talked about before, obviously OC folds in 18. There's a whole lot that we could talk about with that and open it up. But I think, like we've talked about before, adults had those adult conversations, and we're going to leave that for the adults. And that will be that. But for moving on in the 2019 season, Dan, you move on to the Madison Scouts, and I'm curious from you because I don't remember if any OC people were there. I don't know, like your connections for there, but like how did that job come up for you?
Well, I saw on Facebook that they hired Mike Hardick and Michael Turner, two really big names in the visual side of things of pageantry, and I was like,
yeah.
Full disclosure, I fucking hated the Madison Scouts before that season. Like, we're like our arch rivals. And I was like, I never want. I think it's so hideous and gross and so like backwards. Old school and like ugh. But I was like
the brotherhood.
I was like, ew, masculinity. Like I was like, that was back in my era thinking that all masculinity is inherently toxic masculinity. I was just so in my liberal bubble in the Northeast. So I saw they hired these two people and I was like, well, I could learn a lot from these people. And honestly, like while Madison would not be my favorite place to be, I don't think, I could at least like, it would teach me so much. It would expand my ways of thinking. And so I could just if I could even get hired for a summer, I could just do a summer and I could also just leave afterwards. So I really just sent a cold email to them. And I was like, hey, like, are you hiring anyone visual? Let me know. And then Mike Hardick calls me like 48 hours later. He was the caption head. And he's like, hey, like a non-traditional movement person. Can that be you? And I was like, that should have been a red flag at that moment of like, what do you mean a single non-traditional movement person?
A non-traditional moving person.
We've got the traditional movement, the traditional marching person already. We've got the several traditional marching people. And so coming like from the Oregon brain of like, all we do is non-traditional movement, like march. Who needs that? So I was hired to basically like teach every the first hour of every day of move-ins was essentially my job. Was to like to do half an hour of like body warm-up and half an hour of dance training for horns and battery. So that was the role I was hired into. And it was just so, I don't know if I'm getting ahead of myself, but the summer itself was just so incredible. Like I walked in, I didn't meet them until April camp. I walked in and literally like, it was like 5 minutes before brass block on Friday night. And I just see everyone like already in the arcs. They're all chit chatting with each other, all the kids. And I remember seeing George from George.
Yes.
And he's standing there he's like 4 foot something. And there's like this tank that's 7 feet tall and like 200 pure muscle.
George.
Next to George, and he's just talking, and George is smiling in a way I've never seen him smile before. And I was like, if, no offense, George, I love you. If like the tip from Oregon could show up at Madison and just be like involved in this culture, I just walked into space and felt so much warmth and love. And I was immediately like, oh, like brotherhood. That's like a good thing. Like this is a special thing.
Yeah.
And so I left that weekend feeling like totally inspired and being like, this is something that needs to be cherished and preserved. And like, I need to give them my absolute best effort as much as I can. Like these kids deserve the world. And it was just, it was a magical summer.
That's really cool, because I was wondering, because it's just like so much of that. Obviously now they're co-ed, the whole thing. So they've kind of broken that whole like the brotherhood and that whole thing. But I thought the same thing, like coming up, even when my brother marched, and you know, I don't know if it's because he got cut from there and we're all like, fuck Madison, but it's like the vibes and the attitudes, and when you would see them in the lots or just wherever, like it felt like that whole like toxic masculinity brotherhood thing. And that's like something I wanted to know, like, you know, how did you find your place in that? And so it's cool to hear like you were at first being like I love this activity and I want to teach in it, and like we'll just see. And like worst comes to worst, I'll go home. Like I'll do the summer and then I'll go home. But to like go there, experience it, and like how did you find your place in that? Like, was it that moment of just like feeling the warmth of that group, or was it just like was it that?
Well, what I recognized, well, I mean, actually, I was a Boy Scout when I was younger, and the Eagles. So it's like I know like Scout values, and like it all about Boy Scouts. It's not about being a man per se, but like it's about being a person of high values and high integrity, and like do a good turn daily, just be a good person. And so that totally informs the culture of the organization. I mean, literally, like every other night in move-ins, ensemble would be cut an hour shorter, and we would do an hour of leadership stuff. And for the, not just even the entire membership, it was like also for all of the staff, like literally the entire organization.
With Madison in 2019, it was literally like, I think I read the article and I think it was maybe like a month, or it was like a month before tour, maybe during spring training. I think that was the right time, but Madison went co-ed, I think before the 2019 season. Am I right?
Not quite. So it was the day after the Whitewater show, or is it either the Whitewater show or we had a rehearsal there. But I remember we were in Minnesota. We had just driven to Minnesota, and that's when it went public that we were going gender inclusive. So yeah.
Was it like announced? Was it within the core? Did the core know that was going to happen? It just went public during that time, or like?
I'm pretty sure what it was like, so we had a rehearsal in Whitewater, Wisconsin. And I remember Dan Peterson, the head of something in the organization, he sat down all the staff that was on tour at that time and was like, hey, just so you know, tomorrow morning, the board of directors is having a vote of like whether we should go gender inclusive. And we've done like years of research and like polling like the alumni and like also like whatever. And basically like it's probably going to be voted in favor of going gender inclusive. So, and this will be happening tomorrow. So we want you all to be aware. And we also want you to not fan the flames on social media. Just please don't.
Just let it happen.
Yeah.
That's what they were saying. Oh, that's super cool. I love that, because that's literally all I saw on like Facebook. Like when that got posted, like the comments on Facebook and the mad reacts were just insane. There was so much like pushback, because I think at that time Madison was the only core who like went gender inclusive like that, which granted there's only, I think there was only 2 or 3 maybe that were like, all male only. So it was like at that point, it was like, whoa, they actually like, because it had been a conversation of like people trying to talk online about like, hey, they really should do this because it's 2019 now and like times are changing and there's so many different kinds of people in our activity. Like we want everyone to be included. We don't want like places cut off because, people of certain gender can't go there or whatever. Like, we want everybody to do this activity because it's banned. It would be silly to tell someone that they can't do it because of whatever it may be. So I remember how shocking that was at the time for everybody being like, oh, Madison, oh my God, they're going like all like gender inclusive. This is, what's the alumni going to think? And sure enough, like you go in the Facebook comments, you go wherever, and the alumni are just like heated. And I'm curious to know, being there on staff, like, first, was there any, I don't think there was, but I feel like I have to ask, was there any like pushback or maybe question from vets of the organization or maybe staff that had taught at the organization prior?
So that's the really interesting part that never really gets discussed or known by the greater public, is that like
Yeah.
I was there when the kids found out, and it's
Right.
like rather I think it was announced like during breakfast, like that Sunday rehearsal that we had,
Mhm.
and like as I was like on the field like waiting for visual walk to start, and kids started pouring in, and like they were finding out like from breakfast to the field, like they like opened their social media and they found out basically. And all I can remember are like just everyone being like so ecstatic and elated, and like literally like,
Wow.
this is so exciting, this is so amazing, it's so cool to be part of history, I can't wait to say hello to my sisters next year. Like the only
That's
thing that
so
was remote,
awesome.
it was so cool, it was so special, it was so earnest and heartwarming, and it spoke to the values of the organization, which was again brotherhood, but brotherhood not as in like we have penises, but brotherhood like it's good to be a good
We're
person
here for each other.
for each other. We're a family.
Yeah.
And like the most negative thing I heard was just honestly fucking funny. It was a lot of the color guard boys who we had a struggle to fill in the color guard that summer. And so like a lot of like, there were a lot of guys who knew that like they only had a spot because like they were desperate for any human beings to fill a spot. And so there were a bunch of them that were just like, well, there goes our spots next year. It was so
It's kind of funny. That's kind of funny.
it was iconic. But yeah, it's like going, I don't know if I think my phone cut off earlier, but just to speak one more time about I think it's really important for people to understand, like if you're first of all, if you're not male, and you can't ever know this, but to be in an all male environment, I mean, I'm sure many of us can speak to being in situations where it's like gross or like, toxic, but I just think I learned such a huge lesson that like being in an all male environment is not inherently bad or offensive or a cesspool for horrible traits. And in fact, as long as you have good leadership values espoused by some sort of like people that are in charge, like David Loki, core director, was just so incredible and just the exact kind of empathizing force that we needed. And the conversations we had were so vulnerable, and not just about gender for sure, but like there was a space to feel sensitive, or to feel safe and feeling sensitive, and to explore your actual emotions, and to not have to perform masculinity or rigidity or whatever. And I think that while I don't necessarily agree with the ire that a lot of alumni have, I know where they're coming from, because some of them are mad for the wrong reason. Some of them are mad because like they're actually misogynistic. But I think most of them are just upset because this was like the one place in their life where they actually had a community of brothers. Especially like I know a lot of gay men that have marched the organization, where it's like, this is my first opportunity to actually be out around men, around straight men no less, and to feel like defended by these people. Like, these are my brothers. There's one story I heard of someone that I'm close with that he like was living in Madison at the time, because this is like back in like the 80s, where you actually lived where you marched to the rehearsal time. And like I remember there was like a bunch of the guard gays like went down to the gay bar, and then like a bunch of the straight Madison boys that lived there also went
with them,
because of their brothers. Like they wanted quality time together, and like, if this is where you hang out, we're gonna hang out with our brothers. And so it's like, it's so special and so amazing. And until you've lived it, you can't fully understand the experience. And so I do think it's necessary that we went gender inclusive. I think it's the right move, and I'm so happy for all the girls and non-binary people that have taught there. At the same time, I can empathize with what was lost in these people's eyes, but I hope the alumni can ultimately remember that like the brotherhood,
the foundation of the value is still there. Like you've talked about before with brotherhood, that foundation of the value is still there. We're just including everybody into this brotherhood.
Yeah. And there's still great conversations happening. There's still great leadership training. There's still great work ethic. Like there's still all the principles are there. It hasn't gone away just because it's more inclusive.
We did it the first, so now it's like, this is what it is. It's like, no, I think that has to keep being put in place every year as like people change and more people come in and out of the organization. Like, people who, there needs to be that. Absolutely. 100%. I think there does. I this is kind of separate from drum corps, but I was in a music fraternity in college. And when I first got there my freshman year, it was like the dudes, but like we were all music people. So like it's not full frat, I would say. It's not like full till frat. It's like half frat because we're still music people. So we're like a bunch of fucking nerds at the end of the day. Like we go, like we think we're the frat guys. You go to the frat events and they're like, you're the fucking band kids. We're like, yeah, you're so right. But what, like at the beginning in my freshman year, it was cool because like we had just like the dudes, and it was so cool to see throughout COVID and as I graduated, like all the different people that we included like in our fraternity. And the reason why I ask about the pushback was because I experienced that in my own fraternity. And I think like for me, I never minded. Like everyone always made such a big deal about it when we had to talk about like when they would go through their rush process, and we had a couple non-binary people go through a rush process, and the guys are just like, like would mess up the gender, like the preferred gender name or just something like that, and would do it and then like not like relearn or just like take the time to like put that in their brain, or like it was avoided in the room, but like if you went outside the room and you talked to one of them and be like, I'm not gonna lie, I fucking hate it. And you would just be like, what's the problem though? Like I would have to have these conversations with the brothers in my fraternity because we do the same shit of the brotherhood. And I thought the same thing of just like the whole like toxic masculinity thing. I never knew I wanted to be in a frat, but for me, I'm such a big music person, and these guys were also just into music just as much as I was. So I was like, I identify with that. Like I'm gonna go be with these guys. And then like it was cool to then like later as we kept evolving as a chapter and these non-binary people come in, and it's great because they're there now and they're a part of the leadership that is our fraternity now. It's super cool to see that they're the ones who are taking over because like it's about that foundation at the end. It doesn't matter your gender or what, like it's that value of we're there for each other because you're my brother, you're my sister, you're my, you know what I'm saying? We're all here for each other. And I ask about the pushback because I've had to experience it myself. And I think it's silly. And not only have I seen it just like as an outsider, but just myself within an organization I was in. And it's disappointing because when you're like with a person you call your brother and you've gotten close with them and they say some shit like that. And I come from drum corps. I come from band where there's so many different kinds of people that I meet and that I know that I'm friends with. And it's funny, you come back to like Midwest Podunk, Missouri, and they're like, dude, you shower with guys all summer? Oh my God. And it's just like, it's just, especially, I don't, it's at the conversations, as a man in the South that I've had to have, like, and it's so crazy to go to all these different places. And maybe I'm going on a tangent here. It's just funny the conversations that you'll have from people in different areas about this topic. I think it's just interesting. So that's why I kind of go on the tangent about it. Now I've lost all my train of thought because I really enjoy the conversation. Like I really wanted to talk about this because I think it really put, and I'm not like trying to call anybody out, but I think it puts the pressure on like the Cavaliers now to do the same because like, and people are still talking about it, like online, of course, but like, if Madison can do it, why can't the Cavaliers? What's the issue? And maybe I don't know. I mean, obviously there's a board of directors there. There's, staff there. They have their own ideas, their own meetings. They do what they do. I don't know. I have no idea what goes into that, but I agree with the people. Like, like if Madison can do it as such a storied, traditional drum corps, one of the, foundations of the activity, and the Cavaliers are in the same boat as them as, a group that was with them in the beginning to start the whole thing. Like why can't they do it as well? I think it's an interesting topic that should be talked about. I don't know.
Absolutely.
And of course I don't have all the information to talk about it. Which is, I'm not going to act like I'm super smart about everything and try to give you all the information or what you should or shouldn't do. Like at the end of the day, I'm just giving my opinion on it. So I just have to say that part. But oh my goodness, my brain. I just went off on a whole tangent there. I do want to ask a question. Now, like when you're teaching at Madison, how did your experience teaching at Oregon kind of like, help you teach your students in the future? maybe at Madison or just wherever else. But those experiences at Oregon now, putting them into Madison and other high schools, how did those experiences at Oregon kind of help you teach in the future?
I was so lucky teaching at Oregon, which people on the outside may be like, "What? What do you mean? Like the group never placed that well? Like what are you talking about?" And I was like, "Well, it taught me that the experience itself is so much more than the scores, and like I know the effort that went into teaching you all, and I know how satisfying it was to like." I think I discovered at Oregon that 90% of my teaching style is really like emotional coaching. Like it really is just like befriending all of you and finding out like what makes each of you tick, finding out like what you respond to. Like I'm not the best teacher for students that like need to be pushed or like that like want to be pushed. I like love like an intense athletic P90X kind of vibe.
Yeah.
I'm more of like Tracy Kidwell is still someone I'm so close with because she's just like, I had to learn so much about her to get her to trust me. She's like a cat and I love cats. And so it's I really appreciate a character. I really appreciate a backstory. And so my favorite ensembles have been the ones where it's like a little gritty, a little like, we're a little unpolished as an ensemble or like, but just getting that buy-in from students, just leading with kindness and just joy. I think there's a reason why I was literally the only instructor to return after 2019. There was one other visual instructor, and I think the percussion staff were invited back, and they decided not to return for their own reasons. But for the most part, that whole staff was flushed after 2019, and not because they were bad teachers. I don't want to disparage them. There were some really great people, but I think I just had a way higher tolerance for like shitty conditions.
Because you're like, I just did 3 years of like Gogurt breaks and like 45 minutes of sleep.
Exactly.
Dude. Like, what the hell? Like, I got to Blue Nights and they were like, yeah, you get like an hour and a half, 2 hour dinner. I'm like, what? And they're like, yeah, you can like take a nap if you want to. I don't give a shit. Like, as long as you're there for the next block. I'm like, wow. Oh my God.
That's crazy. And so it was like, I there was just so much joy in like getting, someone to get a better tendu or a better passe. Like I had to work on such bare boned fundamentals, but clearly the way I taught the students at Madison resonated with them. Like I remember oftentimes like the vets and the super vets would like invite me to conversations with them at meal breaks because like they're like, I don't know how to deal like with this issue or like with this member or like with this cultural thing. Like how do we like get past it? And, like they saw me as somewhat like a mentor as much as a teacher. And so to just care about the humans so deeply that despite placing the worst they had ever placed up until then that season, they had a fabulous experience because of me. Not just because of me. Like it was fun
the group. And they work together, and it's like always like it's funny because like not only at this level, like below top 12 or wherever, but below top 12, top 3, wherever, like if like groups who like if they ever just focus on the scores, you always can tell by the way they perform and the members carry themselves. Like if that is what's being put into their head, you can tell by the way they carry themselves or where they perform themselves. But the groups that just work on, we're going to put the best versions of ourselves out every day. We're just going to try to work on that. We're going to do the best thing for us, and we're going to be the best versions of ourselves, and we're just going to put that out every day. We're going to be the best us. The groups who do that, you can always tell have the best summers of their life. And they're like, that summer was like the most rewarding one because we just did it for us. And like, no matter where, no matter what the scores of the judges, like no matter who gave us respect or what, like we did it for us and we're proud of the product that we put out there. And I think that's always like, it's so funny hearing it because it's just like, duh, like obviously that should be the route, but like, it's funny hearing from like Crown guys who like every other year, it's like this year we were like really focused on the score and the whatever. And then it's like, we placed 5th that year. I'm like, well, and then the year that you like all cared about each other and were nice to each other, you came in 3rd or 2nd. Look at that. That is just, that's beautiful. And you had a fun show, by the way. It didn't suck. So it's like, that's cool. It's crazy how that works. Just looking out for the members, that whole deal is just, it's funny to hear. But a little like nerd thing that I want to talk about in the 2019 show, because it's not the intro, but it's like, I guess you would call it the end of the second production, basically where they're like hauling ass, like the brass line's hauling ass. And it's like the most fun, like the 2-minute segment. It's not so much about when they're hauling ass and the blocks are rotating. Obviously, that's the fun part. That's when people are like, wow, they're moving fast. For me, it's like DCI perfectly clipped it for YouTube. They started at such a perfect spot in that like triangle form, I guess you would say, pyramid form, whatever, where the brass is in the back. And I had to watch it from like, I had to watch somebody's iPhone footage because I was like, I can't with the multicam. Like, I want to see how this develops. And the way that part develops in the brass drill is like some of the most fun drill I've ever watched in my life. And the way that like the whole ripple starting from like the bottom right corner of the triangle, like moving back up, and the like everything about it is just so perfect. And like, I want to know like two questions. So one from you, like, did you have any part in possibly as the non-traditional mover person? Did you have any part in like designing or like helping out with that part of the show, like that 2.5 minute segment there at the end of the production?
I think out of all the choreography that I designed for the show, I think you see my choreography in the Tuba feature in the beginning of the production. Yeah. And I think they cut all of it when I was gone for most of the summer.
Well, fuck them. Wow, I was gonna be like, oh my god. I was like, from your perspective on Vis Staff, like, damn, how hard was that to like teach that and like have that moment? Like, it's funny because they have like the video of like them doing it like spring training in June, and then you can like see it throughout the season, like other people's show, and it's just, I love that part of the show. Like, that is such an underrated part of 2019. And it's so badass. Like, it is just so much fun. So I had to talk about it and see if you had any part in it, because I fucking love that moment. And I watched it before tonight, and I was like, I just want to see that part like over and over and over again, just for the way that, for me, so much about drill, what makes it cool for me is just the way the shit develops. So for that moment, that 2.5 minute segment, the way that develops with the ripple and like the back line of that triangle, like the triangle set, like the back of that line coming up, and the way that it ripples from back to front, and the way that the blocks get like built together, and then the musical moments of that, all, it's good shit. I really do like it. This is me nerding out about it.
No, that part deserves to be nerded out more. I think what we call it like the wedge, and then it was either the triangle or the wedge, and then the actual like the rotating blocks, the meat grinder, I'm pretty sure is what it was called.
Yeah.
But I remember my one contribution to that whole moment was we had a rehearsal day in Whitewater. Actually, this may have been the day that I don't know. We went to Whitewater several times, so it gets mixed up. I just remember we were in visual block that morning, like cleaning that section, and they got it to be like pretty fucking clean. And that's something that we touch every single day, because it's like every individual pathway has to be exactly straight, has to be exactly the equal size steps. Like, otherwise,
there's not a lot of room for error in that block.
Absolutely not. And so, but they got it so good. And then later that day, we were an ensemble, and we ran that chunk. And it was just like, it wasn't even that bad, but it just wasn't sparkling clean. Yeah. And so the box gives their comments, and they're just like, field. And then I just, like, I have one day a year that I get to yell. And this was that moment. And I was just like, Whoreline! What the fuck was that? Like, I was just like, I am boiling right now. That was the line. That I was just like, how dare you make that look so good this morning? And how dare you not put in the effort this rep to make that fucking Like, I was just joining. I was like,
that was always the comment. Like, it was like, you never yelled and like raised your voice, like to be like, it was like, you would hear like the, what the fuck is that? And you're like, oh, I mean, yeah, it wasn't, but you were like, you were so good. And I know you can be good. Just be good. Yeah. I watched you do it. Just do it again. And like, that was what it was. Like, yeah, fuck, I know.
It was just so. I rarely expressed that kind of audacity in an ensemble setting, because like at Madison, I was cordial with everyone, and I had some good friends, but it wasn't nearly the same camaraderie or chemistry as I had at Oregon. Yeah. So it's like, for me to like just command that authority was like kind of like not really me, but it was so fun to give that comment, and then there was just silence from everyone, and then the box was like, okay, reset, and then they did it again, and then I was like,
next thing you were like,
yeah, and then they did the next rep, and it was great, and then the box gave the comments, and they're like, field, and I was just like, horn line, thank you, and I just
walked.
Yeah.
That's it. That's all you have to do every time.
I like to think that I made that feel even more important for them in that moment. So yeah.
100%. There's times where you need to step in. There's times where you just need to, raise your voice a little bit. I mean, you'd be like, I know you can do it. Just do it. and then they just do it. It's not even like a technical thing. It's just like, just put in the effort, and then you did.
Yeah.
Great.
Crazy.
Moving on for COVID. This is where, for me, and I know in a lot of other people too, like for me as a member, having marched for 4 years at that point, when COVID kind of happened, it was one of those things where we talked about earlier, where it's like being in the cycle year after year and doing it over and over again and going through the process over and over and over again. You get so used to it. And that's kind of like almost like your identity a little bit of like, I do this almost year round. I have to be doing like, I have to be getting ready for May basically all year round. And then when May happens, like goodbye, like I'm gone till August, and then I see you in August, but I'm getting ready for November every time. Like every time I come back home, I'm getting ready for November. November's getting ready for May. So it's constantly just this cycle. And when that gets broken, like COVID kind of broke everything, it, for me, I know, and for other people, you know, as well, it felt like almost like this identity crisis of like what to do, who am I, like what am I without this thing, what am I going to do? Did you experience any of that like during COVID? Just for drum corps, because I know probably everybody like COVID being stuck at home, they're like, what the fuck?
Well, no, I mean, you're so right. I mean, that you kind of took the words out of my mouth. Like I literally was like, who am I? Like, what am I without band? Because like at that point I was teaching, I was in the middle of my second season of teaching indoor percussion. I had a world-class group that was having a great season and was a month away from going to Dayton. I had a Scholastic World group that was in their first year of Scholastic World, and they were doing great. And like, we were just starting to peak in both of those groups. And then COVID happened and it's just stopped everything. And I felt so relieved. And I was like, why do I feel relief? Like, why? That shouldn't be the right reason. And so interrogating that, it was sort of like tugging at the loose thread in the sweater and unraveling it all. I just came to realize that like I just had like my identity was I am someone who teaches band full time. Like that's all I knew.
Yeah.
And so I didn't know like who Dan was. What did Dan want to do with his life? Like what did Dan have besides band? And so I had spent a couple months. I reached out to some mentors, and I found some. There was this crazy candidate that ran for, not crazy. She seemed crazy. People meet her as if she was crazy. Running for the Democratic presidential primary for 2020. Her name is Marianne Williams. I share her stuff all the time.
Love it.
I saw her sound bites about love, like in politics, and I was like, that's so funny, but like you can't actually like talk about love. But then listening to what she's saying, kind of like, wait, this is actually like really good for people. Like imagine if like we had like a sense of love for one another. And so I read her book, A Return to Love, and like that literally just was like such a spiritual awakening for me, and just gave me a whole new way to. It put into words what I was kind of living in many ways. This idea of like just being kind to people and being helpful. What you give to others, you give to yourself. And so like the love I would give to people while teaching, is like I feel like I would receive that. I was giving love to myself in that moment. But then I was like, what if, like, I guess, sorry, long story long, I realized that I only found value in myself if I saw that I had improved other people's lives. Like if I saw students that are at a skill because of me, because of my information and my passion and my teaching.
That's the value.
Yeah, then I'm worthwhile. And so what that meant is inherently I didn't believe I had any self-worth. So like it was learning, like, how do I translate this love and joy that I have for other people? Like on one hand, how do I give it to myself? Yeah. And so that's been the growth, the path, the last 4 years. And everything I've been living is just so, I never thought my life would be like this, but it's just better than I ever imagined. Yeah.
Did you like, once like COVID was over, like, did you still teach for 21 and 22? Like, did you go back to Matt? Like, I know like we talked about it, but like, were you there like in depth as you were as in the other seasons?
Not really, just because of the time constraints. 2020, we actually were pretty active online, but obviously that's like not really much.
Right. Yeah.
More than other groups had. But then 2021, I was there for, it was a 6-week season. I was there for the last 2 weeks. Okay. I still, I think, made an impact, and I some of my favorite students ever from that summer for sure. I think it was probably the best show I ever taught as well, besides Oregon 2018. Wow. It's a shame that it wasn't judged, but also it was kind of like musical GE probably would have killed us. It was the same material over and over again. Anyways, doesn't matter. 2022, I was there the last 3 weeks. I showed up like 2 days before the San Antonio Regional. And
Oh, okay, cool.
yeah.
I was gonna ask, like, from a staff perspective, like, what was that kind of like? How did you handle the like the COVID restrictions? Like, were they? Because I remember, like, I saw Blue Knights in 21, and it was literally like I got on, like, I could talk to some staff like in the stands or whatever, but like if I got on the field to like go see Dylan, for example, like get the trumpet section Gatorade, like I had to like stand in my car to get them Gatorade and like put it halfway and be like, I had to talk from my car and be like, hey guys, like, how's the summer going? Like, your Gatorade, you can just grab it from like, you just grab it over there and like whatever. And just like from far away having to be like, who are you? Oh, I'm Jeffrey. I marched here like last summer. What? Okay. Hi. Like, you're meeting everybody. You can't like shake anybody's hand or whatever. Like, even like I had to ask about like, hey, can I bring stuff for people? Like, even going on the field, it was like, you got to stay, like, if you're going to come on the field, like go there, like stay over there. Like, for teaching wise, from your perspective, did you find that like the restrictions were like crazy? Like, did it, kind of change up how you guys taught, or was it just like business as usual?
For Madison, like, again, it's such a like an organization that's driven by values. That admin team is just so, like, I don't want to say goody two shoes, because that I feel like that diminishes, that tarnishes the actual just
Right.
like high ethics that they operated by.
Yeah.
That's not to say that every instructor abided by those guidelines. Certainly many broke the protocol. But it didn't seem to be as egregious as it was with other organizations. And personally, I was trying to stay as safe as possible. I'm trying to think of anything like I was I was also just in general very cautious of COVID and took it very seriously at that time.
Yeah.
So it didn't really limit anything. And in fact, almost made it more fun, because it was truly like, this is for us. Like, this is like, we can't have anyone else here. Like, this just has to be like, we're doing this for us. And the level of excellence that summer, like, that was probably the most excellent Madison that I taught. And it was a fan favorite of a show too. So like, even if the fans couldn't really interact with us, it was still like online. At
They
least
loved it.
Yeah, it was fun.
That's really cool. That is awesome. I want to kind of like wrap up and with this episode, but I want to talk about, like, I want to ask you some teaching questions, just some in-depth, like, nerdy little like teaching questions that I kind of had that I wanted to like kind of hear your perspective on. So something I wanted to ask, teaching now on the visual side, is what do you take into account when you are trying to make a designer's vision come to life on the field? I know that might be like really in depth, but I really like that question.
Yeah. So for me, it's tricky because it depends on like who exactly your design staff team is.
Real, absolutely.
And also, like, what my involvement would be. Are we going to keep this like in a totally drum corps context, like me as a tech, or
it can be anywhere, like wherever. Like, that's kind of just a general like marching arts teaching question for me.
So for me, a lot of how I teach, when I taught when I was at Oregon, in that chapter of my life, like, I was still like just immediately had graduated college. And so I was so into like all my dance vocabulary. So I was like, very academic. So at that point in teaching, it was really about, I'm not going to answer your question directly. I'm totally going to give a different answer.
That's fine.
But in that era, I was teaching just to demonstrate that I knew content. And so I was not at all focused on being efficient or even really effective. I was just focused on like, these are things I know. Can you perform them? Or like, you can be better in this way. And so I was so focused on the details that mattered to me, that were most interesting to me, or sort of like, this is a dance-shaped piece of the puzzle. This is involving information that I know about breath or release or like the body X, whatever. When I got to Madison, it was a lot more of like, okay, I'm kind of in this more leadership role in 2019. So this is sort of like, I need to make this just as inviting as possible for the kids. And at that point, like, I was technically the choreographer, and the design was so just ambiguous. Like, I remember one of the designers, I mentioned the word nostalgic, and he's like, no, this show isn't nostalgic. And I'm like, we're dressed up as like fucking 1940s sailors. Like, what do you mean?
Yeah, like, what are we talking?
So like, I was trying to choreograph in a way where it's like, okay, let me just make sure we're checking off a lot of boxes. Like, let's get a lot of variety of vocabulary in here that's also like super easy and cleanable.
Yeah.
but nowadays, now it's evolved ever since starting to judge indoor percussion visual effect the past few years. It's made me, I've just watched so many shows through the lens of effect and thinking like, what does it mean to be effective? And so now it's like, okay, at any point, what takes me out of the production? Like, where do I lapse in focus? Either because, and is it because it's not interesting? There's no events happening. Is it because it's just awkward and pacing? Like, this is just like, doesn't make sense.
Yeah.
Is it because there's a storyline that's not fleshed out? Is it because
Yeah.
the kids are simply not excellent enough or not energetic enough? And so now when I teach, it's way about like always effect first. Like, what are we going for? What is the story of the show? What needs to happen here? And how do I make sure that it's either diverse from or different from everything else we've seen or will see, or is specifically like referential to something else we'll see, if that makes sense.
It does. Like, that is exactly what I was like, you know, trying to like hear about, because for me, I've always been the performer. So I've always just taken the information and like never really like thought about it, or like how design wise or whatever, like how this, you know, idea kind of needs to be produced and created on the field or maybe on the floor, wherever you're at. So I'm always like curious if I ever like get to talk to a staff member who does, because like visual was always my favorite part of the activity. Like, I always loved that. And I don't know if it was because like when I was playing, I wasn't like the best musician in the world, but like I loved the visual aspect of it and how creative you could get with it. So for me, like, that's why I'm always super curious if I can talk to a visual person, like, and especially if you ever get the chance to choreograph or design or whatever, like, how do you like, you know, convey that idea or produce that idea? So I think that's exactly, like, I don't think you answered it incorrectly at all. Like, that was it. That was the one. Something else I wanted to ask about for kind of like maybe your warm-ups, or maybe even back to the choreography of like maybe how you choreograph some things. Is there like maybe like what group or maybe a staff member or individual, whatever, like where do you take inspiration from when, like, maybe when you're teaching or choreographing? That also could be a loaded question. So if you're just like break it down, I'm totally a bad host for that. So, you know.
Well, this is good. This is so good. And this kind of fits into something I want to add to the last question, which is like, something I wanted to add to the last thing is that I kind of broke down sort of like the chapters of my teaching styles to speak to the fact that like no one starts perfectly. And you know, in your beginning stages, you're just going to try to copy what you've already seen or what you've been taught. But it's like, to develop your own point of view, to develop your own voice, you have to like start asking yourself questions about like what matters most to me and what am I most interested in. And I don't think there's any wrong place to start. So it's like, I love that for many years I was really booger at choreographing, and I thought it was like, you know, changing the game. But it's like, really, there was very few things I did that was like actually like effective. It was cool if I was looking at it, and it maybe felt cool for the performers, but like it didn't add to the totality of the show. And so like, you know, in my earlier days of choreographing, it definitely was probably like, I was always trying to be avant-garde, like referencing like things that I had seen in dance class or like things that I had been taught in dance class. And so some referencing vocabulary that like I did or didn't know. Definitely teaching with Ryan Springler has taught me so much, because his choreographic style, like he taught me so much about intention and imbuing things with intention. And then at some point I recognized that like my body is just, the way I move is just naturally so fluid and so noodly, and I have all these long legs. I just love to toss them around. And so, but I thought I couldn't teach that because you can't clean it. But then I was kind of like, well, how do I teach the Dan Hoffman style? And so like a lot of, I think that the peak, the apex of my choreographing, you can see if you look up Casa Grande High School Marching Band 2023. We did a show about crash test dummies. And so
those like, uniforms were incredible. Like, I remember you posted the picture and I was like, that's iconic. That's incredible. That is beautiful.
I think it's an iconic show, and I wish we were on the BOA stage just so people would know more about us. But I think we're in the middle of the desert doing the stupidest shit, but we're doing it like
doing the dumbest shit possible in crash test dummies.
I mean, when you have a love ballad where the color guard, the lab scientists pick up all these inflatable dolls, these blow-up dolls that are dressed in crash test dummy like unit of jumpsuits. It's like dancing with our dummy, like that's so stupid. It's so stupid. it's so, but it's like, I think what was really interesting is going into the season, I knew that I couldn't just teach to be clean. Like clean couldn't be like the most important thing, at least from the forefront. I had to teach from a lens of energy. And so like, honestly, like watching Avatar: The Last Airbender, that actually like
yes.
that helped me see I started to see all energy as some composite of like fire, water, air, and earth. And so it's like I recognize it in myself. I have so much air. So I'm able to just bend around things physically, but also like mentally, I'm able to sort of compartmentalize and sort of like flow, like be easy flowing. And same like water, it can also like sort of like be even more just like gently eroding away, chipping away at like the rock, whatever. But then I was like, I know I don't naturally bring much fire to the table. So it's like, but I know that these kids need that. So it's like, how can I like how can I teach in a way that
fire?
Yeah. How can I be grounded? How can I be more myself and actually like take ownership? And so I feel like I talked about things so poetically, and it was all character driven. It was all energy driven. And it's interesting that could become something so excellent. And ultimately, like it panned out. Like the judges rewarded us. It was the kids' first ever state championship. And so I don't know, teaching from a place of just sheer stupidity. And it's like, if it's not fun, it's not funny, who cares?
Why are we doing it? If it's not fun, why are we doing it? It makes no sense then. Absolutely. I agree 100%. I want to know, kind of wrapping out the teaching portion before, I kind of want to ask a couple questions at the end, a couple fun questions. But last part about teaching, what has been your favorite summer or maybe even favorite season? You can go wherever, like high school, indoor, or drum corps. What has been your favorite season teaching so far and why?
I have to give several answers. 2016 was so fun just because it was like just so surreal. Like the way that I feel like 2016 Oregon Crusaders, I feel like just the staff like was just, it bonded so well, and there was so much talent. And it was all like, and yet there were so many silly problems. 2018 was amazing because the caption heads decided that they were going to look out for each other's interests. And so we were so successful as a group, as an ensemble, because of the teamwork, of putting others ahead of you, and how ultimately you get what you need and more. 2019 was spiritually satisfying. I really feel like that sort of saved me from the brink of like self-worth, and that really sort of like, that was the primer for COVID and the revelations I had about like not loving myself. But like that gave me so much spiritual fuel and foundation. And then this past summer this past fall, I should say, it was the first time where I really was like the biggest voice in on the field in the staff. Like we had Ryan on the design, but he was like remote basically. And so it was like me producing his ideas from afar and translating it.
That's
Like,
really cool.
So creatively, that was so satisfying.
That is really cool. Like almost like a full circle, like going from teaching with him in 16 to now, like he's designing and you're producing the ideas, like.
And literally, it's like the school that he started teaching at. Like this is he's been at that school for like 15 or so years, and so like,
oh my god,
close to 20 now. And so it's like I took over for him after he moved, and so it was really cool.
So cool. That is awesome. I want to round out with a couple questions in this episode, and like I said, like there's been so many good, like there's just been so much good like story information, just good conversation. I love it. But I want to kind of round out with a couple questions. And some of them are fun. Some are more like reflective on maybe like your whole time in drum corps. So kind of starting off on a fun question. What was your favorite free day as a performing member and as a staff member?
Ooh. When I march, when did I have free days? That's a great question. I feel like it probably had to be 2012 when I was marching, just because we had a free day like every Sunday for like 4 weeks in a row. It was like we had a free day in San Francisco, and I had never seen the Pacific Ocean before, so that was like wild.
Wow.
Yeah. Then we had one in Seattle. That was beautiful. There's a picture of me with a pig somewhere. I don't know.
Holy shit.
Yeah. We had a free day in Denver. Got to see my aunt and uncle. And then we had a free day in San Antonio. Yeah, it was pretty lovely.
Yeah, those are like the best free days ever. Like, what?
It wasn't even any day. It was just having so many. Yeah.
Yeah, that is amazing. And then staff member, free day.
Oh my god, what debauchery. I'm trying to. What did I ever do? It's so tricky as a staff member because every day is kind of like a free day when you're on tour, because it's like you kind of teach for like an hour. Like my ensembles never were close to final, so they're always performing so early. So it's like I'm going to have like a 30 to 90 minute visual block and then like an ensemble. And then like, hey, during EPL, you don't have anything to do. Go fuck around somewhere. So no specific things come to mind, but certainly a lot of alcohol. Yes.
Every day's a free day.
Yes.
I just say some things.
Exactly.
I want to round out here. I want to ask something. So I've kind of asked you a lot. I apologize, but I've kind of asked you to be like, what has this, your time at this place meant to you, or this place meant to you? And I'm going with a more in-depth question again, because I just know you have so many great things to say, and I want the people to know who you are. So how has drum corps kind of evolved for you mentally? Because you've gone from, an outsider, a fan who went to Allentown in 2010, 2011, and you watched and you were like, wow, I need to go do this thing, to 2012, like learning to pick up a tuba and doing your first summer of drum corps, to then, taking ballet classes and being part of dance ensembles, to aging out, to becoming a teacher, to becoming a choreographer, all of these different things. And you have progressed throughout your career. How has that evolved for you mentally, your idea of kind of the activity? I know that can be like a loaded question, but kind of what I mean by that is, for me in the beginning, like I saw the activity as like, marching band, competitive, that's cool. Blue Devils, Blue Coats, Carolina Crown, those guys are great. Like, I want to go march there. I, want to go get the scores, whatever. Like, I watched my brother march and I was like, I want to go do Crown or Coats, and I want to win a ring. Like, that's what it was for me. Like, when I got in, like, that's what I thought, like, that meant. Like, it was competitive marching band. This is what, the point of this activity is. And it's going to be really challenging, and, it's going to be really hard, but it's for the scores. And we're going to compete with all these groups over the summer. And then at the end of my first summer, I was like, Carolina Crown has the best brass program. I need to go be with their brass program. And then like year 2, I was like, Blue Devils performers, like, perform in the best way I've ever seen in my life. No one does it like them. And the design of their shows, like 2017 was such an incredible show. And I was like, I need to go be with them. The way they perform is out of this world. And then 2018, it was like, my perspective on it changed every year, to finally in 2019, when I finally got to do finals for the first time. I've talked about it a million times on this podcast, but finally getting to do finals for the first time after fighting for years and getting turned down and being told for years in a row, like, no, you're not good enough to do this. Like, maybe next year. No. And then like I finally get to do it. And before I perform, like, I'm getting teary-eyed because I'm having the realization of 4 years of really hard work and like a lot of hardship. And I'm finally, as a performer, after 3 years of getting to watch my older brother do finals and watch him fight. And then for me, knowing the fight in the years that I've been around this activity, to finally get there. And I get there and I perform, and I think it's going to be this great elation, and the show's over and it's complete emptiness. And it's like, what's the problem? Like, this is what I wanted, right? Like, Saturday night. And I was like, no, like, this wasn't about Saturday night. It's not about the number. Like, you made it to a really cool group and you had a great show this summer and people loved it. But like, the group that I was with in 2019 was my favorite group of people I ever got to be with, and are still to this day some of my best friends in my life. So for me, the activity progressed in my mind from, this is about scores and all of these competitive aspects, to it's about the process and the experience, as corny as that sounds. It's about the people, it's the process, and it's everything but what you think it's for. Like, when you first get in, I feel like you think it's the show and it's the tour, and it's literally everything in between that you end up, when you walk away, like, for me at least, like, I walk away and I'm like, I can only remember the things in between. Like, I like the shows, the scores, whatever, competitively, I can barely, it's a blur. But like, everything of those moments in between, free days, the work, meeting people, whatever, the after shows, whatever, like, that's what it was all about for me at the end of the day. So after my long rant now, I'm curious, for you, and I hope it's not too challenging, like it's not too crazy of a question. I just really am curious because you've had so much time being around this activity. Did you kind of have a same journey? I guess that's kind of how I want to reword this question, or maybe what was your journey in that? I'm sorry, that was such a mouthful, but I really do want to know because you've been around the activity and done almost every like part of it.
Yeah. No, I think it's great. And I like that you provide that perspective because it's reminding me of something profound I've been reading in this book recently. It's called 4,000 Hour, or it's like Time Management for Mortals, 4,000 Hours, something like that. I don't know. Um,
Yeah.
but he talks a lot about the idea of like, oftentimes we live in a way where we sort of instrumentalize our time, where like we our time is always in service of achieving some future goal, that the joy or the presence or the worth of whatever we're doing is always cast into the future,
Mhm.
um, versus living like having like an atelic approach to time, which is ATELIC, this idea that it's like living, like just experience something for its own sake. Like when you go
Mhm.
for a hike, really like you're only going to experience, like you're just going for the sake of being on the hike. It doesn't grow
Yeah.
you. It doesn't, or it doesn't like serve any purpose. It's
Yeah.
just in this experience. And so I feel like that's an interesting lens to consider this question through, because I feel like so much of my drum corps experience was similar to yours, and maybe like instrumentalizing it to like get me to like, it's all about finals night. Or in
Mhm.
my case, it was more like it's all about meeting the people that will get me like farther in the activity, or it's all about getting the experiences in the resume to get me to be a famous designer.
Yeah.
And it's like I moved to Arizona 6 years ago to become a full-time pageantry designer. And
Yeah.
like I was doing it for a year and a half, and it made me so miserable. It made me so poor. Like I did not have money.
Yeah.
And so in the way that you said that it like uh oh, I lost my train of thought. Dang it. Um
You're okay.
uh it's so much more. It's about everything except the thing that you think it's for.
Yeah.
And so like ultimately, if I did not have my drum corps journey, it would not have opened up my view of life to be so much more open as it is today. To be
Mhm.
I can use the adventures from my drum corps experience, and I can think through, I can process the intensity of it and recognize it's like, I don't want to live a life that's like a drum corps tour. Like I don't want to live a life where I feel like I'm always panicked and rushed, and I'm like memories are fleeting because I'm not present in any given moment. Like I don't want to
Mhm.
live in a way that is so militarized and so like it's finding the balance between like finding growth and desire,
Mhm.
the desire to get better, but to not let this moment serve as just in service of getting better. But it's like I enjoy the process of getting better right now. Um, I will say, to maybe be a bit more concrete, as a performer, I feel like I was kind of shitty as like a performer. Like I just wasn't. I wasn't horrible. I don't think. Maybe my first year, but like I was a blender for sure.
Yeah.
Um, but it wasn't until I taught and taught and taught that I got to discover how to perform some of these skill sets, to perform them really
Yeah.
well. Like I really learned how to jazz run on a free day in Syracuse in 2018. Like Ryan Springler taught me in Izzy Montoya's living room. Um, and like maybe that was my favorite free day. Actually, that was a fun free day. That's my hometown, so getting to see my hometown for the first time in a while.
Mhm.
Anyways, but it was like so special to know how to jazz run, despite the fact that I'll never have a need to perform this ever again, you know?
Yeah.
And like the people I was along with, it showed me a heightened idea of the people that I could find and that I could love and feel in community with. And so it's,
Yeah.
while I can keep my standards high in terms of the people that I'm looking for, but I also don't have to live in search of people. It's more of
Right.
like whatever comes my way, I want to enjoy it for what I can, and not let it go by, but also not be so attached to it that I can't allow it to pass through and move on. That like I
Oh.
will remain despite whatever experiences come.
Oh. Oh my God. Oh, that is so good. The like just the yeah, that I don't even know. I don't even think I have words. Just that last part right there. Oh my
Yeah.
God. That is so good. And it's just like, because I think that for me was why it felt so empty for me on finals night was the like the fast paced of everything just being like, I have to keep going. I have to keep going for the goal. Like it's for this, it's for that. Like I have to, whatever I got to do to get here. And it's just going to keep going. And then you get there and it's like, were you present during this run? Like, because for me, that run specifically, I can remember I was so mad because I was just like, I don't feel like I'm enjoying this. Like I enjoy it and I'm glad I'm doing this and I'm like killing it, but like something feels off. And it just, I hated it because at the end of the show, I didn't get the full emotion that I usually would at the end of a season. And I was like, and I had just thought back on everything and it was like being present for the moment you had been waiting for years. And like, and then were you present for these other moments along the way, you know? And it's like that for me, I think, and I think that like you said it in such a great way. I don't think I could say it that smart, but like, that is just like, that is what I think I've learned as I've like gone through life too after drum corps. Like that moment for me, like, I'm glad I had that at 18 and not like later in my life. I'm glad I had that then because now like I like when I went back and I tried to do another camp of drum corps, like I made sure I was present like every single moment of it and like really trying to be like, look, if you don't feel the way that this used to make you feel like, then you can't put yourself back in it just because you're like the goal, the thing, the whatever, like, because if you're not going to enjoy it, why are you putting out the money, like the thousands of dollars and then putting in the effort and commitment to go do that? And so like it helped having that at 18 because when I went back and I went to a camp and they were like, you know, it's going to be your age out year. Like you should do it, right? Because it's going to be your age out. And I just looked at everyone. I was like, no, nope. Yeah. And they're like, what happened? You did this for so many years and all these things. I was like, doesn't feel right. Like it just doesn't, like this doesn't feel right now. This doesn't feel like, I don't know. It's not that I don't know. I think also at that period I was going through like the fuck DCI phase. Like I was battling it. I was like, I'll come back, but I'm still not like, I'm not pleased with this, but like, I'm going to do it. But I still went into that week and I was like, you have to go into it with an open mind. Like it was stay present in the moment. I think that's the most important thing because I see so many other people do it. And now that's kind of why I want to talk about it because like, I remember I taught high schoolers and I remember I told them that because like it was my age out summer when I taught high school and they were like, Jeff, are you going to go march your age out somewhere? I was like, probably not. And they're like, what? You did Blue Nights. I was like, cool. Like I'm probably not going to go do it, honestly. And they're like, but I'm going to go audition. I'm like, that's cool. Like, where are you going to go? And like 2-3 kids I taught, like March Phantom, like Music City, all these other places. And I was like, that's awesome. Like that's super cool. So like good for like, you know, I hope you guys have a great summer. And they're like, you're really not gonna. I'm like, no, like I'm not. I did it for a long time. It's just not. I can't. And it's cool because then like I talked to them and they're like, yeah, I'm doing this year. Like the kid who did Music City was like, I'm doing Music City, but like I'm going to Coates next year. And I'm like,
you think?
I'm like, brother, just enjoy it. Like,
yeah,
just go do your first summer. Go do your like first summer and like get good at your instrument, get good at performing, and like meet some people, have some fun. Like that's all I say. I'm like, go have fun. Like that's it. Like it's just, I don't know. Like and like they think I'm like hating when I'm like, don't worry about Coates, don't worry about devs. And I'm just like, because it's like if that is meant to be. Like that opportunity will come in your life. Like that will be there. That'll be presented. I feel like truly, because I kept knocking on the door of Boston for years, being like, well, my brother did it. I had like, it makes sense. Right. And I kept knocking for years and they were just like, no. And then all of a sudden I was like, Blue Nights. I never thought of Blue Nights. And I like slip in and it's just like, wait, this is what I think, like, this is drum corps to me. Like, this is how the activity should go. Like the whole summer, how that went, I was like, this is what drum corps is to me. This is, it's not the scores. It's not the compete. It's this, like this process of how we do it and how we come together as a group and do it for us. That's what it's about. So again, I went on a tangent too. God damn. I do it all the time talking about this, but, oh my goodness. I love it. I lost my train of thought too just now. Because my last question I always ask everybody, I feel like I don't even like have to ask because it could be a short answer, but I feel like we talked about it just then. And my question I always like to ask everybody at the end, and I guess I'll ask it now, but like, what does drum corps mean to you? Like in your life of who you are. I know every time I ask somebody, they're like, whoa, life shattering.
Well, it's so funny. I'm so grateful for it, and it's done so much for me, and I'm sure that I'll love it again. But for now, I only see it as like, this is just like, what's that Peggy Hill quote about like if being in Phoenix, where it's like, this is a testament to like man's arrogance.
Oh, I don't know actually.
There's something about like Phoenix should not exist because it's like, it's just so like the heat here is so super. I don't know.
Yeah, Phoenix should not exist.
I feel like DCI in its current form is just so missing the point of like what it used to be. And I never thought I would be a drum corps boomer about this, but it's like, I really feel like the highest value of it is the community that it can elicit and inspire, and it can connect people to one another. They can keep people off the streets and get them to see different places and to have these wild experiences. And that is available now, but essentially only to those who are rich enough. Like it changed and transformed my life when I marched it, but like I only got by because like I was the only one from my town to have marched drum corps in like decades, and so I was able to crowdfund all that money. But nowadays it's like I kind of stopped teaching. Oh, a big factor why I stopped teaching drum corps is not the students are wonderful people, but it was just like I couldn't empathize or relate anymore to the experiences these kids were having, because these are kids that have an extra $5,000, $6,000, $7,000, and I don't mean to fault them. That's not their fault for having it, and I'm grateful.
No, but it is a crazy price to do this activity now. When like you think about it, like probably even when you started and like when I started, like it was like, I mean, even then, like kids were still having trouble like getting the dues. I remember at OC in 16, like it was still like at 3,500, like that was a hill to tackle. So it's like looking at it now, like almost 6,000, getting to 7,000. It's like, bro, good God.
It's been so, the whole activity, all the branches of pageantry have been so professionalized, which, you know, I can't, you know, I recognize my complicity in that, because it's like, I get paid to do things, but it's like getting paid $200 to judge an indoor show, or getting paid $1,500 to teach a marching band season is very different than these designers that are getting paid like 7, 8, 9, 10,000 for a product that's still garbage. I'll say it.
Which like, I didn't even know that was like a real thing until like, I don't even know who I heard that from. I had a conversation about that recently, just like the prices, because they were just like, yeah, I mean, like the budget of like a designer is crazy. It's just like not being able to pay staff because that designer budget is so high. And I was just like, how high could that be? Like,
and like, I don't want to put all the fault. I don't want to necessarily put all the fault or all the blame onto these designers, because at the end of the day, I love that there's an avenue for these people to make a living doing something artistic, but it's like there are so few drum corps left that there should not be any space for any person that isn't like good at what they do. Like a huge reason why I left drum corps after 2022 was like I was ready to be done with it, and I was ready to have some financial stability in my life, and like it's but it's like I got paid, I think $700. Oh, I was promised a certain amount of money to do those 3 weeks of drum corps. I ultimately got $100 less than that, which was like, I'm already underselling myself. This is crazy that you pay me less than that. I'm not going to blame anyone, because I ultimately didn't make any noise about it. So it's like, I was ultimately, I had to be fine with, I was fine with it.
Right.
But then I discovered how much our props were in that 2022 show, how much they cost. And it's like,
and the uniforms.
And the uniforms, oftentimes those are actually not that expensive. There's partnership, whatever. But like the props themselves, like these are like tens of thousands of dollars, and it's like, what value did those props add to these kids' experience? These steel beams soldered together with no wheels, so they had to be just physically lifted and transported, and they ultimately added zero effect to the show. That money was spent on those props, versus how little money did you pay me, and what effect did I have on these students? And it's like, and I know I changed many of those kids' lives. And I say that with as little ego as possible. I just know that that's true. And I'm grateful for that opportunity. But it's like, this activity has gotten so far away from the people and valuing the people and making it accessible to as many people as possible. And
it made it what it was in the first place.
Yeah. And so I appreciate the artistry, but I get so pissed off when groups have bad design or essentially a waste of all these monetary resources. Like for many kids, so I'm jaded and bitter about it. I'm still a fan. I still watch it. But I'm hopeful that we can find a way to make this sustainable again and make this accessible again. But I don't know. It feels a lot of ego.
I agree. I absolutely agree. I think it's everyone's like number one complaint who has like left the activity, that it's just become like inaccessible. Like it's just so hard to do the activity, period. Like the worry used to be like, oh my God, am I going to go audition? Now it's like, do I even have the money? Like, well, we're not even close to having the money. And it's just too like, I think you're absolutely, and it's cool. It's really refreshing to hear it from a staff perspective of someone who was teaching rather than just us members, because I know like this is a member-based podcast. Like we're here for the members, but like to hear from a staff member who was a part of it and like being able to provide the other side of it sometimes and be like, here's our opinions on it too. We're not just here to, and I think it's funny just to like, it's cool to hear the, like the budget breakdowns of where the money is going. And it's like, being able to provide information like this and be able to talk about it. I think like to spend all of that money on props to like, I'm thinking about situations like us that we had in OC in 18, where it's just like, I mean, obviously we don't have the same budget as groups who can, that's a whole different story. I'm just thinking of situations that could happen like that, where, they're going to sacrifice a necessity for what they think could be an effect or whatever, just for like the flashy prop of like, you're going to want to see our prop this year, but it costs like, we're not going to have like, pay for staff or whatever. We're going to have to hire like, this type of whatever. Like, it's just, I absolutely agree. And I really hope that it can, with new leadership that's starting at the top, I really hope that, in the new era, it feels like we're in right now. Because ever since it's funny because I've been hearing that. It's not like I don't know if maybe I'm reaching here, but just hearing from the people who had either marched or taught, like, it's not that the kids are bad. It's like the type of kids. And it's what you're talking about, the empathizing with the members being like the experiences that they're experiencing compared to like, when you marched in 2012 to 2015 and teaching the 2016 to 2018 Oregon Crusaders and those type of kids that came through there. It sounds like that new era that we're in right now is kind of, that's the big thing of just like, it's not so, it's becoming inaccessible. So we can only get this type of person because these are the only type of like maybe not type of people. I don't know how to exactly explain it. I don't know if I'm getting on the right words, but do you know what I'm kind of saying?
It was hard for me to see myself in many of my students, which is not totally fair to them. And I want to be clear, if anyone's watching that I've taught you, like I love you so much. And it's like really cool. And honestly, a lot of the too comes from like the things that if I can't offer like the emotional coaching, if I can't help you through hard times or just be a listening ear for your like traumas, then at least I can teach you about choreography and movement. And like, it's just, again, ego of like designers. So it's like, I'm not on the design staff, so I can't talk about like how terrible these plies are, but it's like, can we talk about your heel stays on the ground? Like can I please talk about like what I'm trained to teach? Like, it was interesting in 2022. I found myself being sort of like the old school guy. Like I was the one yelling at them about like, remember like every time I did this led movement warm up in the morning, I would teach them like, when you go through the PB&J line, you're going to take a piece of bread, put a slab of peanut butter on it, take another piece of bread, put a slab of jelly on there, get the hell out of the line. Once you get out of line, then you can like make it look pretty if you want. But like, you're not going to like, I was like teaching them like how to drum corps. It's like, I feel like we've lost like what I think is so fun about drum corps. Yeah. I love the activity. I love the kids. Not me contradicting everything I just said. No, it's just, it's an interesting place. Like if a kid continues on this path, it's going to be, I'm curious to see what the solution is to make it accessible to more people. Cause this changed my life for the better. And I want that open to more people. So we'll see how
100%. I absolutely agree. And I think with that, that is where we're going to round out for this episode. I think that's a great note to end on, that it should be accessible to everybody because there was a period in time where it could be. So I think that's fair for everybody. So with that, oh my God, sorry, something just I don't know what, but with that, we're going to wrap up with episode 21 with Dan Hoffman. Dan, thank you so much for coming on. This was, like I expected to be, a fucking blast. This was so much fun, and getting to talk to you again. It's been so long since I've gotten to talk to you, and I just had a blast. I just want to say thank you for coming on.
I'm just so proud of you. Like, you've grown so much since the little Pegasus I once knew, and I'm just so...
Pegasus. Why did I get that nickname, by the way? Dude, I never knew. You started calling me it. I was like, everyone said it, and it was just like, that's Pegasus for 2016.
So in 2016, Josh Dawes was in the box in VisualBlock, and he's like, "Who is that down there?" Like, pointing to you, and like trying to like adjust your dot, and you're like, "Jeffrey!" And he's like, "Who?" And you're like, "Jeffrey!" And he's like, "Pegasus?" And you're like, "No, Jeffrey!" And he's like, "Okay, Pegasus, move to your left." And just everything.
Yeah, no, he called me the wrong last name like all summer. Like, he would say Rikus on purpose, even though I knew, like, I would be like, yo.
Yeah. Just a little. I bless that man. I love him so much. The people that we've met.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Good old Josh Dawes. Oh my goodness. Oh man. So Pegasus, oh my God, I remember that now. Okay, the origin story. We have it.
Yeah.
We have it. So with that, thank you guys so much for watching. This has been episode 21 of the Meet the Bus podcast. Trying to see if I have anything. So there's been so much going on in life between, job interviews, editor situation, trying to put out the pod, doing go check out the buy stop video. For everyone who's watching this video right now, go check out the buy stop video, especially if you're a member who's marching this summer. I mentioned a new kind of like summer performer series that I want to do this summer, where I'm covering like 5 current marching members for the summer. It's not going to be kind of like this with the podcast. It's going to be more of like 5-minute to 10-minute check-ins with kind of like every person that I'm following along the summer. And we're going to try to see how we can do it and kind of just do like maybe an every other week kind of deal, or maybe, something along those lines. I don't have all the details shelled out for it yet, but it's something I know I want to do. And I talk more about it in the last video, the buy stop video, so definitely go check that out. And with that, ladies and gentlemen, thank you guys so much for watching. Thank you, Dan, for coming on. This has been episode 21 of the Meet the Bus podcast, and we will see you guys next week.